Hello and welcome to the MinnMax Show, a place about games, friends, and getting better. I'm Ben Hansen, joined by Serial Vasquez.
Hi.
Leo Vader.
Hi.
And Kyle Hilliard.
Hello.
Welcome, everybody. We have a special fun show for you here. We're talking about the PlayStation 3. It's time to go back and just reminisce on that console, our favorite exclusives, all that fun stuff. More PS3 news than you can shake a stick at. Then we'll go over maybe some new games that have been released. Maybe we'll talk about Monster Hunter Rise a little bit. Talk briefly about It Takes Two. I'm sure we'll talk about it more next week. Some more odds and ends. And then back half of the show, of course, we have some wonderful, just delightful questions submitted by the community, pulled from Patreon, which every week, Leo, it's humbling to read through those and be like, people are so smart. These questions are so good. This week in particular, I was just floored by God, every single question is just perfect. Like, you couldn't ask for a better community submitting better questions over there on Patreon. It's amazing.
Come ruin it.
Yeah, come ruin it by supporting us on Patreon. You can win a great prize from I Am 8-Bit. To follow up on last week's episode, we had the Twitter poll to figure out the greatest Bethesda game of all time. And it was interesting. Like, we randomized it, the full bracket. So everybody complaining last week, like, hey, you stabbed Evil Within in the back, eh? All that fun stuff. Everything got its due. Evil Within went down hard and it went down fast. But I understand they're great games. A lot of fans out there. Couple upsets were interesting. Dishonored beat Morrowind, which I didn't see coming. And then Fallout New Vegas, again, we acknowledged last week, we know there are fans. It crushed Oblivion in the polls, which I did not see coming. But then Kyle, believe it or not, it came down to Fallout 3 versus Skyrim, and Skyrim won. Ta-da!
Yeah. I voted in those since I wasn't on last week, so I thought it was okay.
Okay. Yeah, it was all right. But thanks, everybody, for voting over there on MinnMax's Twitter. Okay, the PlayStation 3. Let's go back in time. This is hot news. It's very relevant because a story broke from The Gamer on Monday reporting that the PlayStation 3 stores will be shut off on July 2nd, and the PSP online store as well, and then the Vita following in August. So it's one of those things we, expected might not be too far away, but this is the first trickle that, hey, one report is saying that these things are going offline this summer, and you won't be able to download these old PlayStation exclusives, and the PS3 had a lot of great downloadable things and just great games on that platform in general, so we thought it'd be a nice time to kind of stroll back in time and reflect on some of the greatest PlayStation 3 exclusives. Leo, how are you defining an exclusive?
I don't know. For this conversation, I just feel like anything I strongly associate with that console more than anything. Even if it eventually did get a HD whatever on PS4, I feel like if that's where my memories are with the game, we should talk about it.
Yeah, but we're not going to be going like BioShock, Assassin's Creed 2. I mean, those things, like, we're going for the loose definition of a PlayStation exclusive where it launched exclusively and maybe it trickled out on other platforms after that. But Kyle, where's your love at for the PlayStation 3? You want to take us back in time and just talk about, I don't know, the announcement? Do you remember anything about the announcement, your hype level, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the price sticks out as being way too much. It was after the Wii, right? Because it was 360, then a year later, then it was Wii and PS3. Mm-hmm. And it was definitely the bottom of the tier for me. I loved my 360. I looking back, actually, because I have my list that I've kept for a long time of just every game I've ever beaten. Yeah. The 360 is easily the longest by a huge margin. And then the Wii I just adored because I love Nintendo stuff. And the PlayStation 3 was maybe the first console in my sort of college to adult life that I didn't really feel like I needed to get day one. I wasn't there right away to get it. It wasn't that exciting for me because the price was also a big turnoff as a college student. But I mean, there's I got one, and there's a lot of games that I really love on it for sure.
Yeah, I think the college thing was huge for me too, where I remember freshman year, it was we had our dorm room fully packed up. I was ready to head home for the summer, and it was just one laptop sitting there. I remember watching the E3 reveal of the PlayStation 3 with the classic $599 US, all the giant enemy crabs, everybody's favorite E3 moments of all time. I remember watching it with my roommates and being $600? I just won't get one. And it wasn't until 2008 that I eventually bought a PS3, but then I absolutely loved it. I mean, I didn't have a 360 then for years. It was kind of this weird period in my gaming life. But really loved the PS3, and it really paid off to start working at Game Informer in that era, because whenever there were copies of games flying around, everybody was playing on 360s. It's like, I don't know, who wants this PS3 copy of the game? I'm like, I'll take it. So my PS3 catalog is just gigantic because Game Informer was such a 360 office. I imagine gamers around the world at that period were just leaning 360 in such a big bad way there. Surreal? Do you remember the early memories of the PS3?
I do remember the $599 thing. It was weird because like a lot of the early stuff was so negative about that, like the giant enemy crabs and things like that, of just like things that are very memey. But yeah, I also did not get one at launch. I didn't get one until like 2008. But I think that to me was like the first time that the consoles had this weird kind of distinction between one or the other, where like 360 is where all the shooters were, or like here's where you get online stuff, and here's like where you get a lot of indie stuff. And at the beginning, like the PS3 didn't really even have like a good online store. It didn't have trophies.
Right.
It was this weird thing that came in kind of hot in a weird way that they were catching up to Microsoft. But I also do remember it as like the fighting game console for me, because I think a lot of that stuff was so different. And if I remember correctly, the PS3 had better versions of most fighting games because there wasn't as much of a for one, it was a really bad generation for D-pads. I think as a whole, I think both of them were really bad. But yeah, I ended up getting my first arcade stick for PS3.
Yeah. And Leo, were you in high school? Where were you at when this thing was launching?
When it was launching, it doesn't matter. It wasn't a part of my life at all. No one I knew had one. We were a 360 community. And then when I finally got one, which would have been 2012, probably, it was like, oh, now I have all these exclusives for $10 to $15 at GameStop, which was awesome. For my budget at the time, it was perfect to be like, go through all these excellent games that are just cheap now because of the nature of time.
Yeah.
They're new to me.
It's also weird how there was that swap, later on, because originally, like, the 360 could play Xbox games, but it didn't have that kind of established library. But PS3, like the original one, could play PS2 and PS3 games. So it was almost like Sony was like the console you got to have like that entire family of Sony consoles. It was like a retro console, and it still kind of is. But it's interesting to see that having swapped now at this point between Sony and Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Sony kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit with that, because it was just a feature that disappeared over the course of its life. Like, I still have my, was it 60 gigabyte?
Yep.
Like
it's 60 and 20
PS3
it started.
Console, and it's one that I probably won't be putting in a closet or selling ever, because it's like the one system I have that I can still pop Metal Gear Solid 1 into and play.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking back to all this PS3 stuff, I got angry all over again. But like, remember all those rumors about the PS5? It's like, oh, it's going to be fully backwards compatible, and how exciting that was, like every generation of PlayStation. And then that just eventually all fell apart. It's just so soul crushing.
Yeah. And then, like, I mean, even beyond like that, like hardware level backwards compatibility, they made a big effort of putting, PS1 classics and eventually PS2 games on the marketplace, which was like huge. Looking, I'm sure a bunch of people did this and tried to figure out, okay, well, they're going to close the store, so what can I re-download and get on my console? And for one, I want to say that process is laborious. It's not good.
Sucks.
Yeah, it's like the download list or whatever is such a pain in the ass feature to use. But it was such a big thing for like putting all of my favorite games and seeing that entire history. It was this weird kind of like, oh right, I did download at one point the demo for this game or whatever. It was such a weird thing to go back to now. I booted up my PS3 and was cruising through it, and it was just overwhelmed by like, God, I had so many things installed on this hard drive. This is wild to me now that games were so small back in the day. Like, look at all these indie things ready to go. It's nice that going back to the start, I remember I had like Madden Arcade, like that weird arcadey Madden release. That was like one of the first downloadable games that I downloaded, or like Trash Panic. There's so many like old games. Like, oh, I love that. This was just on my hard drive the entire time. Right? Yeah, it was like an era before really being so self-conscious about that hard drive space at all times. Yeah, and seeing like, oh man, I don't know how much room these consoles have, but also seeing that like, oh, like this game is only like 110 megs or like this, like maybe like a lot of the PSN games at the time were like maybe 500 megs max. And so I was able to stuff quite a few games. Like I have 2 PS3s that I still have access to. And so like putting everything that I have. And also like though I totally forgot that it had like compatibility with both Vita and PSP. And so like I ran out of space on my Vita really quick. But I have a bunch of like those little bubbles and stuff on both of my PS3s, just in case I ever need to download, this one random PSP mini. But yeah, like that. Yeah. Also the process of like, you have to actively tell the system to download something in the background. And then after it downloads, you have to go into the little bubble and then install it. And then you can't do anything else while that's installing. They were still really figuring out a lot of what digital games were. Because, even both on Xbox and PS3, there was that thing of like, if you download a game on the from PSN, you're effectively downloading the demo, which a lot of games came with, and like this unlock key. And so you have to remember to get both of those on your console before it, before you can actually play the game.
Yeah. So we each have 3 of our favorite exclusives. Roughly, we can kind of go around the horn and run down these suckers. Leo, I couldn't imagine a better place to start. I'm choosing you, dude. I want you to hit us with the number 3 Leo Vader exclusive PlayStation 3 title.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to believe this.
Uh-huh.
It's Infamous, the first one.
Oh, the first one specifically.
Yeah, I really adored that game when I got it. It was one of the only game ever with a karma system where immediately after beating it while going one way, I played through it again the other karmic direction because I would just wanted to play more of it. And it was very fond memories, very fond early like city exploration, grinding around on those power lines.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, I'm like 100% with you, Leo. Like it is one of the few games, I think I did it with 2 as well, but like you beat it, I got the good ending, and I just instantly started a new game to get the other ending, which I like never do. And just movement felt so good. I loved Sly Cooper, and it was one that I was like really excited for. I was like, okay, let's see what they've got next. And like it was an age like where there weren't like a lot of superhero stories yet. Like the MCU hadn't really kicked off. We weren't totally overloaded with like superhero games and movies and TV shows. So it felt kind of novel. It had a good comic book presentation, and the story of Infamous 1, I think, is really cool and has like a really interesting twist at the end, I love it. I actually put it over 2 for sure, just because of that like initial impact of like, 2 refined a lot of the things in 1, but the first game just really resonated with me in a big way. I adore Infamous.
I guess we won't spoil Infamous's ending, but like, what about the story was so unique to you, just in the superhero level?
Well, just because there weren't a lot of sort of AAA video game stories about someone getting powers and like learning how to use powers. Like I feel like that's a story that I've seen a lot now and I still really enjoy. But at the time it was new and it really worked in a video game setting because you were literally unlocking new abilities and learning how to use them at the same time as Cole,
Yeah.
And the mystery of
that game.
Just from it being an original character, like you're saying. Like that added a lot to it not being based on anything.
Yeah, and then like the Akira superfan in me just loves the opening of the game because you press start and it's just an explosion. Like there's not like, you don't go into options or anything like that. It's just like start game and it just instantly goes into a cutscene where everything explodes and it just like it rolls right into it. And then it also, whenever you reload the game after leaving it, it doesn't pause you at a start screen. It just drops you right into the game, which I wish more games would do. I love that.
Yeah. I do remember really liking the story of the last couple hours where it just feels like, if I remember correctly, it was a lot of like, well, I'm losing all of my allies. I have like two pretty large villainous factions that are both kind of like coming at me from both sides, and I have to figure out what I'm going to do. And there's like the morality stuff was kind of weird because it was kind of like Cole is ostensibly a good guy, but it's like you can kind of just play him as a jerk. But I do remember like that being a case where we just hadn't seen a lot of stories in video games that revolved around superheroes or like that took them quote unquote seriously, even though in graphic novels that was like what everyone was doing. But seeing that in a video game I think was pretty cool. And so like that ended up being my number 3 as well.
I mean, that's got to be within a year, right, before they announced the Infamous TV show or Infamous movie coming from PlayStation Productions, where they're trying to bring out more PlayStation IP into Hollywood and bringing it to the screen, like Infamous is right there. My favorite little weird tidbit about Infamous is when we visited Sucker Punch and we're talking about the origins of Infamous, they said, and it was such a weird beat, but they said they were pitching Sony, because it was before Sucker Punch was owned by Sony, and they were pitching Sony on different IP they could make. One of them was, what was it called? True Hero, I think, was like the early phase of Infamous. And another idea they pitched was a character very inspired by Lost, getting lost on an island that there were dinosaurs on, and the game was called Uncharted. And this is like before, I don't even know if Project Big had even started at Naughty Dog at that point, but Sucker Punch was very funny about like, it was just a name we didn't know. And and the person we were pitching to at Sony didn't react. They didn't like write it down and being like, we're going to use that name later. But it's a weird coincidence that now these two juggernauts for Sony Studios both pitched games called Uncharted. But anyways, weird deal. So that's Serial's number 3. Number 3, Kyle, what do you got?
My number 3 is Heavenly Sword.
Awesome choice.
From
That's as
Ninja
PS3
Theory.
as you can get.
Yeah, man. That game, it's certainly not perfect. It didn't run very well. It was early in the PS3's life. It's not very long, which I was fine with. I've always been fine with that, but it's pretty short. But like, a lot of people elevate Naughty Dog for being the studio that very early on recognized the value of like performance capture and storytelling in video games. But like every time that conversation comes up, I'm like, can we please talk about Heavenly Sword? Because like they were working with Andy Serkis. They were like I remember like booting up that game and just being blown away by the facial animation and being able to see like the pores in characters' skin and stuff like that. And the story is so strange and unique, and the world is so interesting, and the combat's very cool. It's one that I've played through at least twice. I mean, I don't know if you remember, Hanson, there was this podcast that 1UP used to do. It's an interesting idea where they would like play through games. It kind of reminds me of The Deepest Dive.
So they were trying to create the best, most thorough discussion about games on the internet, but didn't quite
and
get
they
there.
Did Heavenly Sword, and I remember just listening and being like, I think I want to play this. And I sat down and I beat it a second time in one sitting because I was just so engaged with it. I really love Heavenly Sword. I feel like it doesn't quite get the credit it deserves in terms of like recognizing sort of what we consider like the modern importance of performance capture in video games. I feel like they were doing it early before most were. Yeah.
Wasn't there a sequence where you have to steer the arrow with the 6-axis?
Yes, and you can turn that off the first chance you get to do that.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
I went back.
It's like in the opening scene, you control cannonballs, and like you can do it once or twice, but you can just pause and turn it off, which is, I appreciate.
Thank God. Yeah, I went back and watched the E3 2006 presentation, and it is like, it is hilarious that their big closers showing like, and this is the PlayStation 3 controller, the 6-axis. It seemed like that was the big 180 from showing the boomerang earlier. Now it's like, we're doubling down on the classic form, but it's a whole new dimension. And they have a Warhawk demo, and I tweeted it out from the MinnMax account, but it is so hilarious to see this developer for the new Warhawk game using the 6-axis, and he just looks like every crappy sitcom where someone's playing a game, but it's like, this guy knows the game so well, but still he's like, whoa, like leaning into it, just gyrating around the stage, and he had to give a little song and dance to Phil Harrison about like, this is opening up a whole new dimension for developers. We cannot imagine.
We're taking out Rumble because this is better.
This is so, who needs Rumble? Yeah. Rumble's the past, unless it's HD.
I also remember, that boomerang controller was such a wild concept at the time, and everyone would like just unilaterally like rejected it. But I wonder now, in the face of like the PS4 and PS5 controllers being very like significantly different, and people being like, oh yeah, this is like enormously better than the DualShock, if that controller wouldn't have actually also been better than the DualShock 3 at some point.
Honestly, like in a world where the classic consoles are flying off the shelves, if Sony seriously just manufactured the boomerang controllers functional for PS3 and released it, I think they would make a lot of money. I would buy one. Like, what a weird thing to own. Yeah,
that would be such a weird nostalgia play, because it's like when Microsoft released like a USB version of the Duke controller, this would basically be like, what if we made a fake version of the Duke, effectively, like of just, hey, remember that time we showed you this controller you hated? $49.99.
It'd be like, remember how this didn't exist?
Right.
That's nostalgic.
Yeah, and then come up with a little hook on the back.
Copy of
so you can,
StarCraft Ghost.
you could like hang it, like mount it above your head like a trophy. Like there's cool things you could do with the boomerang.
You could throw it and it would come back to you. It'd be amazing.
Oh yeah, that's true. I've tried that so many times with the DualShock, it don't work.
From the slacks I've been in over the last few years, I can confirm, yes, all you fuckers will buy that.
Hey, my number 3 is the same way Heavenly Sword kind of gets overlooked, Kyle. I feel like this series gets overlooked when you talk about like the rise of indie games, the indie revolution. But I guess focusing it down, I'll say PixelJunk Shooter. But for me, like the PixelJunk series on PS3 was so huge, and being a huge fan again of like 1UP, I remember them really focusing on these games from Q Games so much, and it really elevated like, look at these small, awesome games being released on a console now. I mean, this is going back to 2007 was the first PixelJunk game with racers. But it's an super fun series, so interesting just to have this indie branding that did help elevate it and to like be able to interconnect these completely different genres and things just with the PixelJunk name and the Q Games pedigree was a really smart way to get more attention to these experimental projects. But Shooter is probably my favorite. I really like Shooter 1 and Shooter 2 just for a co-op experience where you're saving the scientists. You know, it's a lot of mixing elements of like, okay, you got lava here, so you need to blast this with the rocket to release the water to cool the lava so you can go rescue the scientists over there. But I had such a great time going through those in co-op.
Yeah, I that was essentially my number 4 was PixelJunk Shooter. Like the PixelJunk games were always ones that I was like, ooh, this is supposed to be really good. I'm going to play it, but like none of them really clicked with me until Shooter. And I'm with you. Like I loved Shooter. I thought it was fantastic. And I remember the E3 where they announced PixelJunk Shooter 2 ended up being like my favorite announcement because they announced Twisted Metal during that show, and I'm not a big Twisted Metal fan. And then they also announced PS Plus during that show, and I was like, I don't really want to pay for this. This doesn't really sound like a compelling like thing for me. But then they had PixelJunk Shooter just in the middle of a montage. They had PixelJunk Shooter 2, and I was like, hell yeah, PixelJunk Shooter. That's the best thing in this whole show.
Yeah, I guess 1 and 2, they released something called PixelJunk Shooter Ultimate that's on PS4 and also on Steam, I guess. So it's out there, which is nice. But for the full rundown of PixelJunk games, just so we don't lose track, it's very clear. It goes Racers, Monsters, Eden, Shooter, Shooter 2, Side Scroller, which I liked, but kind of just felt like repurposing of some Shooter stuff. PixelJunk 4AM, which one of the greatest game names of all time. There's like that
music,
it's like a visualizer. We had a move controller to kind of affect it a little bit. Then Monsters 2, then Eden 2, and then of course PixelJunk Raiders, the Stadia exclusive, just for the full journey. They have been around. I really liked Eden 2. Eden, the first one, I should say. I went and tried Eden 2. It's on Switch, and it's like I just feel like the controls could be. They're a little too faithful to that original game, but the idea of just like the fun grappling hook with the artistic, background and music is a really fun idea. But PixelJunk Shooter, everybody, check it out. Leo, number 2, what do you got, man?
My number 2 is Tokyo Jungle.
Hell yes.
Oh, right, nice.
Which is a game I imagine most people have heard of, or more people have heard of rather than played, because you can only play it on PlayStation Now at this point, I think.
Okay.
It never got released on anything after PS3, but it was a game where you played as animals in a post-apocalyptic world where humans had vanished from society. And you're running around in Tokyo. And the really novel thing was that every animal played differently, like not just between carnivores and herbivores who were going after animals or plants, respectively, but each animal being more equipped to deal with different animals and, moving up the food chain as far as what you could actually fight and take on, or like try to get in a quick hit to stun them and make a run for it.
Yeah.
And then the gameplay was trying to keep your bloodline going as long as possible, like trying to breed and get multiple generations of animals until you can accomplish these different challenges that'll unlock different animals. It was a really fun loop. And eventually you got to dinosaurs and crap if you
Top of the
survive
food
long
chain.
enough.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, remember
That game was crazy.
Yeah, the Pomeranian was big. I remember it was a lot. Maybe it's just because I didn't get that far. I remember it was a lot of stealth as a deer, which is like, all right. See, this is why I like the downloadable games for PS3. Just these weird choices.
Yes,
You do.
and great co-op.
If you're not familiar with the game, you should Google. I think it was only in Japan where it got a physical release. That box art is incredible because it's just a post-apocalyptic city with a fog, and there's just a cute Pomeranian dog just like tiny and framed in the center of this like rubble. It's fantastic. It's amazing.
That's perfect. Cool. Yeah, I missed that game. I should go back to it at some point. But realistically, I don't think I ever will, which is sad. Serial, number 2?
My number 2 is Demon's Souls.
Oh, of course.
The first big Souls-like game, back when they were not calling them that yet.
I was about to say, is that a Souls-like? It's just the Souls at that point.
That's what they called it. This is the Souls.
But yeah, that was definitely a game that I bounced off of the first time I played, because I thought it was like, not good, because like those games do not have a lot of, especially those early ones, do not look polished the way a lot of like even contemporary games looked. And it just took me a long time to get, like, I played it, abandoned it, and then like after everyone was like, no, this game's actually really cool. And I think it might have been after I played through Dark Souls that I went back and played Demon's Souls and was like, oh, okay, now that I kind of understand what this game is supposed to be, I really enjoyed it. And then like even after, like, I think the remake also has made me like that game a lot more than I used to. Because of like, I just remember even now how here's this like basic concept of this really difficult game where you're kind of, like what we understand now as Souls games. But even in that context, it had a lot of unique ideas that they don't really go back to. Like, I just remember the first time I saw the skeletons that roll at you. And just like, I remember thinking immediately, like, are they trying to make fun of me of how much I've been rolling this whole game? Like, this is what you look like, idiot. And like this entire time just rolling at you and attacking you. And like, the way that game is kind of just fundamentally busted with like magic and stuff, but it still kind of works. It just made me think like, oh yeah, like a game doesn't always have to be like balanced or perfect or whatever to actually be good. It can just be this weird broken thing that actually really works somehow. But that game is really good.
Yeah, that's a great choice, even if it's on the tip of her.
That was so fun to watch. Like, my wife played it a lot, weirdly, which is not her typical genre. So I saw her play a lot of it, but it was fun to watch, to track it as being this like, throwaway is not the right word, but it's just like, oh, it's another one of those weird Atlas games that you're only going to see like 5 copies total in your region, and like they're going to get snapped up by collectors. But then it slowly started bubbling, and it even got like a Game of the Year award from a couple places, and I was like, what is this little thing? It's been interesting to watch it expand from that one game,
Yeah, it's like it felt like as if Etri and Odyssey suddenly became the most dominant genre in the industry. It's just like that weird little thing that people were talking about, I guess, like suddenly blew up.
Yeah, I even as far back as like, I want to say late 2008, I think it was, that you'd see blogs of like, hey, this Demon's Souls game from Atlas, I think could be super cool. And I remember seeing someone write like, Demon's Souls like out Metroid's Metroid and out Zelda's Zelda, and just thinking like, there's no way. And it just like it doesn't seem as like wild a comparison now, but like, hats off to that person for being as prescient as they were, to just like have the courage to say like, this random game that, like does not, it doesn't really have any prestige to it, is as good as like anything contemporary or like classics. I think was like a really good call. And so like, I remember, like that game, that series trajectory is so wild to look back on now.
Yeah, I think we all agree. Hats off to that person. They really, they called it.
I don't remember who it was.
Still a bad title though. The apostrophe S into the word souls.
It's one demon has many souls. Okay,
I get it dramatically, but it does not feel good in my mouth. Demon's soul.
Yeah,
Demon's souls, multiple souls, Kyle.
It is souls. I don't know. Kyle, number 2.
Number 2, God of War 3 is my number 2.
Of course.
I had hit this point, which we've even talked about recently on the show, where you kind of have these like ebbs and flows of like, nothing's really grabbing me right now, but then something will like really grab you. I was having sort of one of those moments right before God of War 3 came out, where I was like, I don't know if I love games as much as I used to, and it was like 10 minutes into the opening of that game that totally like revitalized everything I loved about video games. The opening of that game is incredible. I still think it outdoes. I know a lot of people love the stranger fight in the recent God of War, which is amazing. But I think just the build up, the sort of the drop off of God of War 2, like teasing like you're climbing Mount Olympus, and then the beginning of God of War 3 where you fight like a bunch of gods while climbing Mount Olympus. It's just like incredible. And then the game, it's like one of the most like enjoyable sort of trilogy conclusions I've ever played through in video games and maybe media. Is just like in terms of just a really satisfying conclusion to everything that had been, you know, laid down for God of War 1 and 2. And it just looks incredible. It plays really well. Every boss fight is like memorable and stunning. Like it's a game that I'll just like play through the beginning occasionally again, just because it's so cool.
All right.
Or just the Guitar Hero mini game.
I'll just skip to that. Yeah, absolutely.
If you had to rank the mainline God of Wars, Kyle.
Yeah.
I think you know where this is going. What would you do?
Are we including PSP games in there?
If I had to rank them, I would.
No, just let's go with the 4.
The 4.
Yeah.
Okay. I think God of War 2 is still my favorite.
Wow.
I love God of War 2. And then then the new one, and then 3, and then 1. But like the new one and 3 are really close for me. Like it's certainly a different game. Like, you know, obviously, like it's a much different story in a different game. Or 3 is very much like a bombastic, let's see how insane we can get. And then the new one is a more muted kind of story about fatherhood that's really compelling, and I adore it. But I love them both for like different reasons, you know?
Yeah. There it is, everybody. My number 2 is one of the weirdest development stories, I think, in the industry that I'm fascinated by, but it's a game called Rochard. Rochard. PS3 exclusive. I think it also came out on PC, but it's not in Steam. It's never left the PS3. Like, it was never brought to PS4. Also, Recoil Games, the developer, as far as I can tell, just completely dropped off the face of the earth. I can't find anything about the team that made this, but it was just this indie game, 2.5D, I guess you can call it trucker Metroidvania, light on the Metroidvania elements, more just puzzle solving, with like basically the gravity gun from Half-Life, but just cool platforming, exploration, and a lot of puzzle solving with a gravity gun. But I really like that game, and I felt like I was such a weird defender of Rochard because it just did not get enough attention for when it released back in 2011. But I remember when it came out, I was enjoying it so much and nobody was talking about it. And I said I would have been on the podcast, I guess, but I think I tweeted out that if you buy Rochard and you don't like it, I will send you your $10 and you can get your money back. I will just pay if you don't like this game. And only one person took me up on it. And I went through Twitter and dug it up. And it was this guy named Davey Paul, who eventually tweeted to me and said, "Hey, the $10 arrived. It's a solemn reminder that people on the internet are real." So thank you, Davey, for trying the game and apparently not liking it. And I paid them $10. But Rochard,
I started it, but it didn't hook me in. Can I have $10 as well? Or?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No problem, man.
I had it installed.
$10?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Suriel. And Leo?
I think it was a PlayStation Plus thing, and I got it installed on my PS3, but I never started it up.
Okay.
So I think that makes me the most eligible for a refund.
Great. We'll see what we can do. The Patreon funds.
I did like what I played.
It seems like it'd be up your alley, Kyle.
Yeah, I remember because I have a very distinct memory because I had just started at Game Informer and we were having because I started late in the year and we were having end of the year debates. And you were like, guys, Rochard is really good. And I remember you being like, it combines elements of Half-Life with elements of Metroid. And I remember you even being like, I know those games are like insane to compare it to.
I'm sure the room was very reasonable about it.
I swear this game is good.
Yeah, and then they threw me out the window, I believe. Leo, number 1?
Number 1. Hold on to your hats. It's The Last of Us, Part 1.
Of course.
I adored the story, but I don't know if it would be my number 1 if not for that sweet multiplayer. It was a full period of my life, a full 6-month period that I remember very clearly of when I had moved back in with my parents and I worked at a restaurant, and every night I would come home and I'd boot up The Last of Us and I put on a gamer headset that I bought for that game because having a mic was such an advantage on console before everybody had a mic at all times. And that was before Discord or anything too. So it's not like I had friends to hang out with every night. It was instead I would go play online and make new friends and have a weirdly social experience that way and play just that multiplayer, which God, I loved it so much. The way it was stealthy and rewarded you being careful and quiet and planning and you're ahead with your loadout and everything. I thought it was clever in a way I hadn't seen a lot of team-based multiplayers be.
Yeah, and you made an episode of Watch Later about why you love the multiplayer mode. It's on MinnMax's YouTube channel. You can check it out. But I remember in that video you mentioned like what seemed like a cool thing at the time, which was it would pull in your Facebook friends and be like, hey, check it out, the pandemic. These of your friends have been wiped out by the pandemic. And it's like, no more. Thank you, Facebook.
There was that weird era where everyone was games were trying to get like Facebook connectivity and Twitter access and stuff. I remember people talking about how like I think Uncharted 2
Uncharted 2
had let you tweet out of it, and people were like, I don't know. Like even then people were like, I don't know about this.
Because you would like link it and then it would tweet out every time you finished a chapter, which is so insane.
Yeah, you can also set it to tweet out every time you unlocked a trophy in any game, which was like,
cool.
no, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, now, I mean, Hades might as well have that for everybody posting their clear screens. You know?
Yeah.
May as well.
Cool,
Once it
internet.
comes to
Great choice, Leo. Somebody had to do it. And it has a story too. Did you know that?
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, this list was, I don't know for you guys, it was really hard for me to sort of bring it down to 3. And I definitely had that moment where I was like, what are some of the best PS3 games? And I was like, oh my God, The Last of Us was a PS3 game.
Yeah.
I always think of it as a PS4 game at this point.
It's such a great PS4 port.
Yeah, for me, the hard part was like figuring out like a lot of the games that I really strongly associate with the PS3 were not exclusives. For me, like I think if we were to like say like what is the best game you played on PS3, it's probably that online edition of Street Fighter 3, because it was such a feature complete version of that game. Even though it wasn't like arcade perfect, the stuff they added was just incredible. But like yeah, in terms of like the exclusives, it was hard to like distinguish because I have so many fond memories of non-exclusive games. But yeah, I think my number one is like 100% the most exclusive game for PS3, which is Metal Gear Solid 4. Just for how like it is still weird to me that I don't think that game has not left that console in any way, shape, or form.
Well, PlayStation Now you can stream.
Yeah, you have to run it through like the PS3 emulator, right? Like I don't know. There's no native version of that game outside of like it running on PS3 architecture, which is strange. But yeah, I remember liking Metal Gear Solid 4 a lot when it came out, of just like, wow, this is a wild experience. And I think that's the reason I bought a PS3. Because I think like a few months before that, I played through the rest of the Metal Gear Solid games and was like, oh, okay. Because I'd heard a lot about like, oh, people really like Metal Gear Solid 3. And so I played through, like, well, I want to play through the rest of the series just in case. And so it just happened that at the end, after I beat Metal Gear Solid 3, I had like the money to buy PS3 and Metal Gear Solid 4.
That's perfect.
And I want to say I might have even gotten Metal Gear Solid 4 before I had a PS3. I think I might have bought that collector's edition, which was I think $100, and then waited a couple months and then got a PS3. So I played through it. I really loved it. I think it was probably my favorite game of 2008. But then I remember like as it went on, it's like, oh, it's just like it's too cinematic, it's too short or whatever. Like it's not as in depth it's not as systemic as a lot of other games or whatever, even Metal Gear. But I think now looking back on it, it's such a weird object of just like
yes.
I cannot believe how many things they let Kojima get away with this game.
It really is one of the strangest games ever made, and I love it. Like I had a similar situation with you where I bought the game before I had my PS3 because I couldn't afford the PS3 yet, but best friend Ronnie had one. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to buy the game, and then because I'm buying your copy of the game that'll eventually give you should let me borrow your PS3. So I got to play it like day one, and it was so exciting to like have this new console I didn't even own yet. I was just borrowing from a friend and blast through it. But it is striking. Even like going back to the original reveal trailer, it was at that E3 2006, so I watched it again. It is just like an avalanche of weird that I completely forgot about, where this reveal trailer, it's like, very Black Hawk Down, obviously the Act 1 it's really focusing on, and it's
is this the finally a policy switch one?
No, I don't think so, because there was kind of like a weird teaser later. Yeah, but so for this one, it's they show the geckos early on, so you're seeing Metal Gear Rex heads, and then with weird legs, and they're pooping in the streets, and then it's just, hey, we have Meryl, we have Liquid Ocelot, we have Otacon coming back, showing like all your friends are coming back, and we have Solid Snake coming back. And then the end of the trailer is Snake just putting a fucking gun in his mouth, and then it's just the bullet. Like the sound of the gunshot, it blows my mind that in their big triumphant return of like, Solid Snake's back, everybody, they end the reveal trailer with him blowing his brains out.
He's back to blow his brains out.
It's insane.
Yeah, I feel like if they had like actually gone through with that decision and actually had that be the ending, I think it would have been one of the greatest games ever made. And just like,
oh my God.
Which is effectively like what ends up happening. Like that character does not exist beyond that game. Like
right.
They haven't made a sequel. He's not in Revengeance at all. Like in hindsight, I'm sure like at the time they were like, we can't kill Solid Snake. We're gonna make more games, and it turns out they never really did make more Solid Snake games
yet.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 6 will return. We'll have older Snake coming back.
Now he has 2 guns in his mouth.
Oldest Snake, Elder Snake. But yeah, like the entire like 18 endings that game has, like the how each chapter I think is like really distinct in terms of what kind of gameplay or even like aesthetic things it's going for. Yeah, it's such a strange game to play. It is almost less of a game and more like that kind of interactive movie that everyone wants to talk about in terms of like this is just going for one scene after another, and it's just such a strange game. Like the full motion intro, like the weird intersections where they had like Sonny making eggs after every chapter, and the install screen, like that game is like structurally one of the weirdest games in terms of especially AAA games.
It's
ever.
so rare to have.
It's also a Metal Gear game broken into levels, which is like
Yeah, and it's so weird to have a game that's so story focused, but just so clearly there's dividing lines between Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4. It's like I really like personally. I know it's the least loved, but like I really liked Act 3 just for how weird it was and how much of Metal Gear Solid 3 is relevant for that. And I didn't mind the sneaking through Prague stuff. I thought it was kind of cool, and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world when the guy in the trench coat turns out to be a bunch of those hand robots stacked on top of each other like a Muppet Man. But like it's just so distinct that to be like, oh yeah, Act 2, or like, oh my God, Act 4, that insane flashback of Snake's dream. There's so much packed into that game, even if it is my, it's number 4 on my list of Metal Gears ultimately, just because like I would hesitate
at the bottom of mine too. I love it, but it's my least favorite Metal Gear Solid game for sure.
Right. When you go back and think about literally the 1.5 hour long cutscene at the end, and I was just screaming at my TV like, "You got your point across, Kojima. We got it." When it's like, "Don't you understand? 0, 1 must become 0, but 0 is still a number, so 0 cannot exist." It's like, yeah, I got that concept, but it's literally like 20 minutes of them explaining the fact that 0 is still a number. It's like, I got it, everybody.
Well, you see, the Mayans invented the contents of 0. But yeah, like it's such a like I don't think the story of that game is good, but it is fascinating, like what they do with that game. And I also feel like that had to be, if it wasn't already there before, like the kernel of like, this is not a sustainable way to make a game. Is like we built like chapter 3 especially, like we built all these like incredible environments and they look amazing, and you're going to spend maybe like an hour in them. And you can almost point to this game as like, this is the start of where people thought, let's just make open world games because they're a better use of resources than this. Where you like we spend so much time and budget on like what is this effectively like a 6-hour game.
Right. Yes, it is bonkers. The part that I always am fascinated by is that flashback at the start of Act 4. And I remember visiting Kojima Productions and talking to Ken, who is the producer on that game, who went to school in Minneapolis, which was awesome. So his English was great. But he was talking about the absurd amount of tech wizardry that went into recreating the PlayStation stuff for the start of the Shadow Moses chapter. And he's like, that was an unbelievable amount of effort. And he said that like we worked very closely with PlayStation. Like they actually brought some developers over. Like that was a real Herculean task between Konami and PlayStation working together just to like make that possible on the PlayStation 3. And so I'm sure they could brute force their way around it, but I always wonder if that's one of the reasons why it's not getting re-released, is just like whatever tech was built out to make that happen was so tricky to bring forward. But I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if at this point it would be cleaner to just make a remake of that game, which would be weird to announce out of nowhere. But I could see it's either going to be like original Metal Gear or Metal Gear Solid 4. It's just like Blue Point is making Metal Gear Solid 4 because it's easier.
Yeah, and then the flashback is of Twin Snakes instead of the original. Like they got to do it.
Do you get anything out of 4 without playing the other ones, though, if they were to just remake only that one?
Oh my God.
It's such a quote-unquote conclusion.
Yeah.
I mean,
Serial, it seems like you played, that's the first one you played. Did I misunderstand what you were saying?
No. It was, I played all the other ones leading up to it. Like, I remember.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, but I would be curious to see what that is like, just playing that game out of nowhere. But it was strange to see. I think it was last year or maybe the year before where they put 2 and 3. I think it was just 2 on Good Old Games on GOG.
I think 1 as well.
1 and 2 solo, and then they just never followed up on that for whatever reason.
Right.
So I'd be curious to see if they just end up releasing, like, at some point down the road when Konami gets around to making games again, they just end up releasing, like, remaster those games and then, like, here's a remake of 4. But I could also see it being Konami and then never doing anything again.
I mean, do you think in this world
They're busy knocking away Silent Hill rumors. They got a lot going on.
Yeah. But in this world of everything coming back, does anybody want to say definitively that they are confident we will never see a continuing story that involves Solid Snake? Like, will we ever see canonical Solid Snake post Metal Gear Solid 4? Or is he just Captain America now for the MCU of just like, he's out there, I guess, but...
I think we will, honestly.
You think at some point?
For better or worse. I could even see Kojima doing it in some far-flung future. You know what I mean? Like,
somehow Sony buys the rights, somebody buys the rights. And
yeah, by 2030, when Sony has bought Konami and just said, we're just taking the property rights, you can keep the exercise stuff and the pachinkos, and then they just, team up with Kojima Productions, which they've also bought, and so now it's like a Sony-owned property. But I also remember just like the podcast, the fact that you had an iPod that you could listen to podcasts on while you were playing the game,
and you could listen to the Kojima Productions podcast, which was one of my favorites that Ryan Payton hosted. And you could listen to the making of the game within the game. Like, that was peak Metal Gear Solid 4 hype, was just listening to every millisecond of that podcast of Kojima Productions, and it was just the best. Oh, good times. If you're really interested in the making of Metal Gear Solid 4, back at Game Informer, I wrote a feature about that opening, about the live action stuff and how they filmed those commercials. And so it's really the only big feature I ever wrote, but I think it's called Channeling Creativity, like the opening of Metal Gear Solid 4. And it's cool because we got, we were at Kojima Productions, so I actually got to talk to Ken, the producer, and stuff, just about why they did that, how much it cost, how much Logan, the production company, busted their ass to make that happen, just for the sake of this completely optional thing. It's not needed really in any way, but it's just the best. Metal Gear Solid 4. What's better than that, other than those other 3 games?
Just clones being dudes.
That is a game I don't want to play at all, but I have nothing but love in my heart for.
You just watched Metal Gear Scanlan, right? Over at Giant Bomb?
Yeah.
That's got to be such a weird way to absorb that game.
It was ideal, I think. The commentary track.
Yeah. And I mean, it's stuck on the PlayStation 3, unless you have PS Now, which... is an option, but I mean, it's that weird thing of, so if you have the Metal Gear Solid Legacy Collection, then you get like voucher codes for Metal Gear Solid 1 and VR. But if these rumors are true and the PlayStation Store is shutting down, even if you're going through PS Now, would you be able to you probably wouldn't be able to download Metal Gear Solid 1 in VR for the Legacy Collection, right?
Yeah, I want to say I heard somewhere that it, like, you won't be able to buy anything new, but you can maybe still re-download stuff. But who knows, because it's, it's kind of part of an unconfirmed report, or, a widely circulated but unconfirmed report. So I'm sure whenever they do get around to announcing it, if they do, which I'm sure they will, but that is definitely one of those questions. Because I think Metal Gear Solid, for some reason, I remember playing Metal Gear Solid 1, but I don't remember how I played it, or like, because I thought I'd had that voucher code, but it turns out it's not in my download history. So I just have to figure out, like, do I want to spend $10 to have Metal Gear Solid on a PS3, the store of which is going away, and I guess there's some like internal clock issue where at some point once that store is down, because the system has to check your licenses for downloaded games regularly, eventually once that store is down, like it'll at some point that check will fail and you'll lose access to all of your downloadable games.
Well, maybe they'll come up with some weird patch in there for that.
So we'll see how that goes, but I think there was just this call for like, hey, for people who are hacking the PS3, this is maybe like the number one priority at this point, is to figure out how to emulate that check so that you can actually keep your licenses. But I would like to, Metal Gear Solid 4 is definitely the game that I'm really glad that I have a physical copy of more than any other PS3 game.
Yeah, it's weird to think that the PlayStation 3 has every Metal Gear on it, other than Survive, which is a tragedy. But it's weird to think you can play Phantom Pain on the PS3. It's technically doable. God, Metal Gear Solid 4, the best. It's really bizarre that we haven't done a deepest dive on Metal Gear yet for how much those games are packed full of info and interesting things to talk about. Yep, portable ops, starting out strong. Kyle, number 1?
My number 1, get ready for a Metal Gear Solid length discussion again here. Is Infamous. My number 1 was Infamous.
Okay, perfect.
And you just kept that hidden the entire time we were talking.
I thought you
might
might
in my pocket.
I thought you might go for the Eco and Shadow of the Colossus weird bundle, which is now like the best place to play Eco.
I didn't count that. I mean, the Jack and Daxter HD
games,
was great. And Ico Shadow of the Colossus is great. But those are PS2 games,
Yeah, but still weird that like you can play Eco in 3D on a PlayStation 3 with those glasses.
I have, it's funny.
The way it was meant to be played.
I do have like a collection, I really culled my physical games, but there's like a handful of games I just will never get rid of. And on that shelf for PS3, which is getting really small, I still have Ico and Shadow of the Colossus and Metal Gear Solid 4. Like those are ones that I won't sell off. Heavenly Sword is still in there too,
Yeah. Shout out to a lot of folks in the Patreon. We're big fans of 3D Dot Game Heroes. The game published and co-developed by From Software, but kind of that pixelated voxel Zelda game. A lot of love for that one.
I played a lot of that. That was a good one.
Yeah. Let's see. Shout out to my boy Africa, which I was very, very excited about in that initial reveal, and then eventually came out. And it's like Pokemon Snap, but in Africa, and everyone's like, lame.
Wait, Hanson, did you say your number 1?
Oh, it was Metal Gear Solid 4. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
By a
you
mile.
didn't say it officially.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're right. Good call.
Congratulations.
But number 0, of course, is Africa, where it turns out
Right.
Pokemon Snap, but in
zero
Africa.
number?
The whole
I don't
continent.
understand.
My number 0 must become no number at all. Anyways, that game was not that great. Ultimately, that Africa game, it was really frustrating because you started out and you had to be in the Jeep and you're on a timer and you couldn't walk around, and then even then you could, but it turns out a long, boring walk across the Serengeti. But does anybody else have PS3 gems they want to shout out?
Double Dragon Neon. I didn't play much, but I had it on I never uninstalled it because tabbing over it played the coolest song. Because on PS3 you would mouse over it and it would just play like a song.
Yeah, that's
I recommend looking up the ending for that game, even if you don't ever play it. The ending is really hilarious and weird.
Yeah.
Huh.
Kyle, I'm surprised you didn't mention Journey, because that was my number 4. That was the game that almost made my list.
Journey.
Even though I think it's probably best experience on PC or PS4 where it maybe runs a little better, but I don't remember it running that poorly. But yeah, that game was definitely like a moment in video game discourse of just like, oh wow, games can be this, and it was like this weird kind of like voiceless thing, and it had an interesting co-op thing, and I remember really enjoying Journey as well.
Yeah, Journey's great. And also holds up really well. It's great to go back to. It's short. You can just breeze through it on an afternoon.
Yeah.
Turns out there's a lot of weird games for PlayStation 3 you forget about, like Heroes on the Move, where's all the Sony mascots getting together for the Move controller to really show it off, which is
I reviewed that game as a freelancer.
Really?
Yeah.
It's such a weird one.
It had Sly Cooper in it, so that's fun.
Is that your review?
It wasn't very good.
It's got Sly Cooper. Yeah, I think for whatever reason, when people say PS3 exclusives, for some reason I think White Knight Chronicle, which is not a game I've ever played, but I just remember people talking up White Knight Chronicle at some point.
But
sequel, there's a lot of Well, I don't know if it got a sequel, but I remember people talking about it's this import game from Japan that's exclusive to PS3 at a time when I think 360 had most of the exclusives, and I think it took a while for that game to come to the US, and people were like, oh, just wait for White Knight Chronicle. And then I don't think it really made a splash at all.
Another weird one is Yakuza Dead Souls, which now that everybody loves Yakuza, it's weird to look back and oh yeah, there was that version where zombies infested Kamurocho. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
There's also a lot of, I think, still some fairly large platform differences between 360 and PS3 games, but I think the biggest one would be Nier, which I think was split into 2 versions. Because on 360 it was called Nier Replicant. In Japan it was Nier Replicant, and PS3 it was called Nier Gestalt. And I think that one was only released on PS3, where you played as kind of like a grimdark buff dude. And in Japan, it was called Near Replicant, and you played as like a younger person. And I think that I want to say it was like Imran Khan, a friend of the show, who actually talked about it on Fanbytes podcast, 99 Potions, where he talked about how like that actually changes some of the story beats to be a little bit different. And so like technically that Western version of the like that Western PS3 version, I think is technically like an exclusive to the PS3.
Huh.
Well, in the American version of the game, you're a father saving your son, but in the PlayStation 3 Japan version of the game, in the version that is getting remade, you're a brother saving your sister. So it does like change the dynamic of that relationship in a weird way.
Huh. Other games we missed. People in the Backstage Pass are screaming for Puppeteer. A lot of love for Puppeteer. It's definitely overlooked.
Yeah. I mean, my short list was Uncharted 2 is fantastic. It's great. It's a toss up between Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 4 for me in terms of the best Uncharted. And then Little Big Planet was huge for me. I played a ton of Little Big Planet when it came out. And then I think the other one that I had on my sort of short list is it's kind of a joke now, but like especially at the time, Heavy Rain was like really unique and strange and pretty cool. Like it was, like it inspired a lot of like, Telltale sort of type games. Life is Strange. I know we kind of laugh it off now, but like at the time I felt like I hadn't played anything like it.
It was huge. Yeah, you can't overlook that. You're totally right that now it's like David Cage, whatever, Waka Waka. But back then it was like interactive storytelling potential is Heavy Rain, baby.
It's funny you mentioned that you use that exact phrasing, because I think the first trophy you get in that game is like, thank you for supporting like the future of interactive entertainment. I think is like one of the first trophies you get in that game. But yeah, I remember really liking that game. It's like, I think it was more interesting as like, oh, video games can tell a story this way instead of like, and not necessarily for like, oh, the story that it's you telling with this structure is actually like good, but it was like an interesting way to experience like a story.
I liked that game a lot too. It was the most I've ever liked a Quantic Dream game for sure. Was crowded around the TV making decisions together and stuff. But I think the discourse in my groups around that game was like, we're already so tired of quick time events in this day and age, and then this game is all that, and so it was hard to see it as like pushing anything forward.
Yeah, there were some interesting ones where I think like depending on the difficulty, it was like you were trying to dismantle some sort of trap or something. And I think maybe I want to say you were maybe missing a finger or something, depending on your choices. And so like depending on like how you approached it or in the difficulty, it just became this really difficult quick time event where you had to hold multiple buttons down. I think like that was actually a pretty clever use of it for the most part.
Crawling through like electric wires, I remember. And if you went the wrong direction, it would make you try to push more buttons than you could even really, and it was fun. Like that kind of stuff was interesting.
Yeah, going for different endings and different paths was awesome for sure.
Yeah.
And then the last one that I want to shout out is a weird thing, because there were a lot of games that came out for PS, I think Vita and 3, but like Sound Shapes, I think was definitely like a game that I ended up playing on PS3 that I really enjoyed, in that it was like a rhythm game that isn't like any other rhythm game before or after it.
It's a rhythm platformer. Yeah, I really love Sound Shapes. It's one of my favorites for sure.
I downloaded it on my PS5 as like in terms of like booting up that system and looking through stuff I owned, and I played through like the first couple levels of that game recently, and it's really simple but really engaging and cool.
Yeah, totally. That was one of, I think, I want to say 2 games that I managed to convince my college newspaper to review, because they were very much like, oh, you can review movies and we like your writing or whatever, but I don't know about video games. And I was like, okay, this one is like an album, and I like sort of how I pitched it to them. And it was weird because I was pitching them on doing a review based on the fact that I already liked the game, which is maybe like a little ethically kind of like, I really wanted to review it, so I had to like kind of like be a proponent of it before I even got to write the review. Right. As like an exception. But I remember like I might still have that clip of my review of Sound Shapes of just like being like, oh, this is like it's like playing an album or whatever.
But that's a good transition to the Vita, which
I just want to say one last thing.
Yes,
I had the top loading PS3, this slim late game one where you slide the top open. And I loved it. It was so small and you didn't have to guess where the button was like I do on the new next gen PlayStation 5.
It's not available in stores now.
I look at those 2 buttons on the PS5 and I'm like, I'm either getting a disc or I'm turning this thing on. We're going to find out.
I guess every time.
Yeah, the answer is to just never use that drive unless you're putting in a PS4 game.
But yeah, Vita stuff is also getting shut down, and PSP. So,
Yeah,
you know,
PSP.
shout
I
out
do
to
have,
Crisis Core, of course.
Yeah. Do we want to run down our favorites for PSP? Like, not talk about them at length, but like just give our top 3.
Just run them down. Yeah, what do you got, Serial?
Okay, I think so. Number 1 was it's technically not an exclusive, but Persona 3 Portable, which is like a port that changes a lot about that game. It is like a more visual novel-esque than it was before, because there's no 3D environments, but it added a bunch of stuff. It made the combat a lot better, and it added a female protagonist, which they completely forgot about thereafter, which is a tragedy.
Oh crap, women!
Yeah, number 2 would be Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, which is I think it was probably controversial at the time as being like, oh, it's like Monster Hunter but with Metal Gear mechanics.
Yep.
And I didn't even know what Monster Hunter really was at that point, but I was like, oh, if Monster Hunter is like this, I think I might like Monster Hunter, because I really enjoyed that game. And then number 3 would probably be this Work Time Fun, which is just like,
oh yeah,
as close as we got to like an anti-game of just like this, we're gonna tell you that doing these repetitive tasks kind of sucks. Like none of these games are like that great, but it's like the overarching like, oh, you're doing this to make money so you can buy more of these mini games, and none of them are really great, but it's like there's just something compelling about turning pens around and putting the caps on them for hours and hours to get money.
Very WarioWare-ish is what that one always felt like to me.
Right. And then the rest of you guys are big Vita heads, right?
Yeah, well, PSP, I mean, both the Grand Theft Autos are technical, like, powerhouses.
Yeah.
Like, those games, the fact that those exist on PSP is incredible. Both the God of Wars are great, from Ready at Dawn. Those are both fantastic. And then Lumines was huge on PSP. Yeah. That's where I know that game from. And I also played East 7. It's the only East game I've ever gotten into.
Oh, wow.
PSP. I like that game a lot.
Huh.
Yeah, Vita. I like Lumines. I actually was first exposed to on Vita, because I never had a real like PSP. Because I think I got a PSP Go, but I was always waiting for like one day Lumines is going to be on the digital store, and it never came to that digital store. So I never played the original Lumines until that remaster.
Wow.
But so Lumines Electronic Symphony was the first Lumines that I ever played, and it's one of my favorite Vita games for sure, because that game is great.
Yeah,
the PSP Go rocked. I loved that form factor where it was like just the screen and then you slide it up to get the controls. Played Peace Walker on that bad boy.
That's a good time.
But yeah, Persona 4 Golden was obviously another like pretty big. It wasn't exclusive, but Gravity Rush.
Yeah, it's funny. I love the Vita. Gravity Rush I love, but like it was funny like trying to come up with a list of like greatest hits for me. I was like, well, all these are on other platforms. I just happen to play them on Vita because I like the portable factor. So like Iconoclast is one I played on Vita and I won't shut up about. And then like Guacamelee was another one that I totally associate with Vita, but isn't really a Vita game necessarily, you know? But Gravity Rush was like the one that I kind of found that I was like, I guess that's technically the one true exclusive that I really love.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like the game is best on Vita because they ended up releasing a lot of games from other platforms on it with like additional features, and that ended up being that console's problem was that it didn't have enough like games to justify you playing it on it. But like Muramasa Rebirth is probably my favorite Vita game, and that is a port of a Wii game. That I played both of those versions and I really like the Vita version is better, but also like Tearaway, which I think is like it ended up getting released, but on PS4 I think, but that version is pretty different. And I like games that are just like fiddle around with your console for a few hours, you know, like use the back touch screen for things that aren't super substantive, but they're just kind of fun for a couple minutes.
Take a picture of yourself and we'll put you as the sun in the game, all that weird stuff in Tearaway.
Yeah, the way of just like here's the potential of the Vita in that you can use the back touch screen to like make hills in the ground or whatever to solve certain puzzles. It's just like it's none of it is like really substantive, but it just feels cool in the moment. I'm just like, why don't more video games get more experimental than this? And it's because like it's kind of fluffy. It's like it's just kind of like there to be a feature. It's not going to give you any. It's not going to add to other kinds of games. But when you focus a game on entirely those things, it can be pretty fun.
Yeah, God, I remember there was so much hype about the Vita, and it was like. It was the big news story for so long about the legend of the NGP. Remember it was called that? Like, the NGP, it's going to have some weird back touch thing. It's going to revolutionize everything. It's like, ultimately, there were a couple games at launch that kind of used it, and then Tearaway was interesting. But
why are they always wrong about that?
We're pretty easily persuadable that everything's going to revolutionize video games in every way. The lack of rumble.
That was a Spelunky machine for me for a good 8 months. And not just because it was so fun on that small screen, but you could effortlessly do, LAN style gaming with a PS3, go to a friend's house play Spelunky, and you would be playing on different monitors versus being dragged by the primary player because you have to share a screen. It was like the best way to play co-op in Spelunky was to have a couple Vitas in the mix. It was very fun.
Oh, that's awesome. So,
I mean, Leo, you were a big Vita guy, right? Am I misremembering? I thought, wasn't that like a major console for you?
I love the Vita. Yeah, I had a lot of games for it. I imported like a giant micro SD card from Japan to store more games.
Yeah.
But yeah, adored it.
Rest in peace.
I this week bought a copy of Tactics Ogre because I've never played that game.
Oh, wow.
That is the only game I'm allowing myself to buy in terms of like, oh, I'll buy a game and for this potentially already dead console. But also, if anyone has a way to get portable ops onto my Vita, which I don't think you can do like the normal way because it's not the last time I tried it, it was not compatible with the Vita for some reason, or in my region. I think in Europe maybe it might be. So if anyone has a way to let me play portable ops finally. Which is the one Metal Gear game I haven't finished.
I will say YouTube highlight cuts are very helpful for portable ops and Peace Walker. It's really
I don't want to. Yeah,
it's not saying true to Kojima's vision.
I know, but it's really fun just to watch. If you need a just dash of Metal Gear, you've never experienced those games. It's really wonderful.
What is in Metal Gear? The thing where you get the soldiers out through the air. What is that called again?
Fulton.
Yeah, if you want like a version of Fulton that's like not fun, portable ops is for you.
Yep, definitely check it out. Let's see. Other stuff that happened this week. We should probably talk about a little bit. Monster Hunter Rise, we haven't gotten a chance to check out yet, but I don't know if you all are feeling the rumblings. Maybe I'm just looking at like, Twitter responses and stuff, but I think this game's going to sell a gazillion units. It seems like everybody that played Enjoyed World, which we know is the best-selling Capcom game of all time, and everybody that owns a Switch, like that Venn diagram is hungry for something new, and the reviews are pretty solid, if not revolutionary. It seems like people out there are saying like, it speeds things up, like the dog, the Palamute's cute to ride around. Having the wire bug, like the grappling hook, generally speeds up, and like exploring is kind of fun, but not exactly the next step in Monster Hunter design overall. But Serial, is your hype growing for Monster Hunter Rise?
Yeah, seeing the reviews definitely made me think, oh, right, yeah, I should probably play that. Because I like Monster Hunter World plenty, but that was just kind of an unfortunate circumstance where, okay, they've announced it. I saw it said PC on it. I was like, okay, can't wait to play this game on PC, which turned out to be bad idea because it came out several months later, didn't have as much exclusive content, and like I was so set on playing with my brother, and it was like, okay, I really like this game. I played for 40 hours. Like, you should try it. And he played it, and it's like, I fucking hate this game. And I was like, well, I don't have anybody to play this with, and it was like no one really wanted to play it on PC with me. So I was just like, well, and this game is meant to be played like, especially at the end game, with multiple people. So I was just kind of SOL on that. And I played the demo of Rise and like didn't really take to it immediately. I think a lot of the increased like mobility options were really difficult, and I've forgotten how much of a moveset each of those weapons are.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Because I fought that second boss and got my ass kicked for like 2 hours trying to beat it, and I ultimately did it. And I was like, well, how are you supposed to do it? And it's like, oh, they're using the katana. The weapon for idiots is what everyone told me that sword was. And even the guy who was playing it was like, oh yeah, you have to do. Even this simple weapon has like 2 layers of mechanics to it, where it's like you charge up the blade and you do this like combo or whatever, and this unlocks this level. And so they're all really intricate. So it was just like wasn't maybe in the right place to play it. So I do really want to I do want to like start this game kind of fresh almost. But I heard like the thing that actually got me really into it was that besides the tower defense sections, which are meant, I think is like, these are meant to be multiplayer. It seems like it's more friendly to single player minded people. So I'm kind of curious to check it out from that angle.
Right. Finally, Monster Hunter, just you can play by yourself. Yeah, I guess they have like quests that you can do completely by yourself. It's not all intermingled like it kind of was in World.
Yeah,
but I guess
and
like
you have like partners and stuff that basically act as like party members that can distract the guy, which emulates a lot of what made multiplayer Monster Hunter work. Is that like, oh, I'm doing this thing while you're doing this other thing. Yeah,
I'm still confused about the lobby system and how much more friendly it is. Apparently they made it a little bit better than it was in World and Iceborne, where if you join somebody, you don't have to watch the cutscene together when you're going on like those story missions and stuff. So that's a little bit improved apparently. Like according to the Easy Allies video review, they're harping on that about how it's a little bit improved from that aspect. But if you want to play it on PC, Serial, it apparently is coming out early 2022 in PC, so you could wait all over
again. No,
okay.
I'm just gonna play it on the console that everyone's gonna play it on. I won't get fooled again.
All right, Kyle, are you gonna check out Monster Hunter Rise?
It's funny. I had no intentions to until this conversation, because like speeding things up and opportunities to play alone are like making me actually kind of be like, well, maybe I do want to check this out, because like I got World. Me and my wife set up to play World, but it just did not click with us at all. And like I tried the 3DS one and it didn't click there either. But hey, maybe this time it'll finally click.
I mean, there's always
Monster
something.
mantra.
Yeah, like there's always enough there in Monster Hunter to make me think like, I should really be liking this game more than I am. And I always like it enough, but not like I would like to see what people who really like this kind of game are really into. Like I feel like I'm close to like this should be for me. But like I really like that PC version, but it's just like I didn't play it for hundreds of hours like a lot of people did.
Yeah,
I do tend to struggle in general when a game's sort of core loop is doing the same thing over and over with the expectation of different results. Like that's a big thing for Diablos and Destiny and
Far Cry
and
3.
that kind of. What was that?
Far Cry 3.
Far Cry. Yeah, he knew. He was speaking to me, Voss, directly. But like that style of game is just, it's really hard for that to click with me. I don't really want to do the same stuff repeatedly, and that's kind of where Monster Hunter sings, right? Is like doing those fights over and over again with friends and stuff like that. So I don't know if it'll ever be for me, but I mean, I am very susceptible to hype. So if people are yelling and screaming about it, I might have to pick it up.
But I don't want to dissuade you from picking it up, but you never seem like it.
I already bought it. So
okay, great. But it definitely seems like that type of game is like you got that core group to play with, like you are good to go. And if your wife gets into it, that's cool. But when's the last time you were into like playing games online with a group of friends, Kyle?
Left 4 Dead.
Left 4 Dead, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. All right. Left 4 Dead is Kyle's social life. Hello. Oh. Hey, talking about social life, It Takes Two, also out this week. The new game from Josef Fares and developers over at Hazelight there. Last game was A Way Out, the bizarre co-op prison break game, which I enjoyed quite a bit. Obviously, his big claim to fame was Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, which that was on PS3, right? Probably. Yeah. Just a fantastic game. One of my favorite endings of all time. But It Takes Two, it has looked interesting. The idea of, okay, you're a divorced couple being turned into toys, and then it's a co-op platformer. We'll see how platforming shines through. And the reviews are surprisingly positive. I am so excited to dive into this game. Has anybody started it yet?
I started it with the intention of like, maybe I can play a little bit on my own. Yeah. And that's not an option. So I was not able to.
Yeah. And it does that cool thing that I really like, just like they did for A Way Out, which is surprisingly generous of, a publisher like EA. But if you buy the game, then you get a friend code. I know it's a confusing terminology with Nintendo, but you have a code that you can send to a friend so you can play online co-op with people, but you can also play local co-op. But it's so awesome for Hazelight just to be setting out on this as our niche, is bringing back story-focused co-op experiences. And I enjoyed A Way Out, but definitely a little uneven. So it's nice to see that with this one, it's being much more widely welcomed as a cool experience.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm glad someone is out there doing, is making these narrative co-op experiences. And hopefully this is the one that will click with me more than the last one.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week for sure. And much like my bet with Rochard, I enjoyed there's an interview with Josef Fares, I think Jeff Cork at Game Informer did, where he promised to give you $1,000 if you thought that the game was not fun and packed with variety. Was that the wording, Kyle?
Variety.
I think the wording was that Ben Hansen would give you $1,000.
That's right. Which I don't know why he brought that up. I barely know the guy, but that's nice. But yeah, It Takes Two is out now, and it's out on everything except for Switch. But the plan right now, not 100%, but the plan is that we'll be streaming that on MinnMax's Twitch channel with me and old Ronnie from the Deepest Dive and Final Fantasy VII and all that stuff. The old best friend.
The guy with the PS3?
Yeah, the guy with the sweet PS3. So you can follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/MinnMaxShow. Serial, really quickly, the Immortals DLC. I'm curious about this thing. This is the standalone Chinese mythology DLC, right?
Yeah, so it's like a very kind of similar version. It's kind of like what DLCs do a lot of the time, where they're kind of like, let's just take the base game and make it very small and have you go through it a lot more quickly, right? Like to have basically repeat the loop of the base game and do it a lot more quickly, right?
Like a Prey Moon Crash.
Yeah, and it's like it's fine for that. I think it like accomplishes that, but it just doesn't really have any, like, there's no exciting reason to come back to this. And like the big sell, it's like, oh, it's based on Chinese mythology instead of Greek mythology, but they don't really do anything with that. So like the backstory is kind of like the most intense, kind of new thing about it. But even that is like, okay, here's a force that's kind of wiped out most of the Chinese mythology's gods, and so like you have to fix it as this kind of like warrior that's been plucked out of anonymity, and then you have to kind of restore the balance or whatever, which is basically the premise of the base game. And so from there, it's so
you are playing as a new character, right?
Yeah,
you're not
named Q, whose gender you can't really change, so it's like.
Okay.
But they don't really do anything with that. But like you go out and the island looks very similar. There are like kind of different trees and the architecture is different. But it's like if you could mistake it for the base game, and all the resources are basically the same. Like they're called jade coins instead of coins of Charon, and it's like instead of Ares' Wrath, they call it like Blades of Huangdi. So it's more of a kind of like a glorified palette swap in a lot of ways.
Right, but I'm interested, like if I didn't get that far in Immortals, the base game, but I wanted to, like, is this a cool way to have a boiled down experience of Immortals?
The only thing it's missing is the dungeons, which is kind of one of my favorite parts of the game for me, which is just like, we're going to take these concepts and combine them in kind of interesting, clever, extended ways. So those are really gone. So it's just, you're basically just doing kind of like the shrine-esque areas and like the open world puzzles and stuff. So you're kind of just doing that for, I think, about 7 or 8 hours. But yeah, it's totally fine. It's not anything really exciting or interesting about it outside of its premise. But and there are a couple of like new tools that it's like, hey, if you attack this block, it changes size, and that is a thing you can use to solve puzzles with, right? Yeah. So it's totally fine. It's like I don't think it's gonna make any waves outside of, because I think Ubisoft has done a pretty good job of having for Assassin's Creed like pretty exciting DLCs that take you to new places and stuff. And this is basically that, but for this game, it's not exciting. But hey, if you want to run through Immortals Fenyx Rising in like 7 hours, it seems totally fine for that.
Yeah, sweet. Good to know. You guys want to say goodbye to Kyle with me?
Goodbye, Kyle.
As we go on, we remember Kyle.
I'm graduating? Is that what's happening?
That's right.
Bye, Kyle. Do you want to clap out of here, big grad boy?
Whoa!
Jeff Marchiafava has joined the podcast, everybody. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello.
If you have never watched or listened to the MinnMax Show podcast before, please let us know. If this is your first show, tweet at us. Let us know if it's your first show. I'm just fascinated and curious. Specifically, if you're watching on YouTube, I want you to leave a comment as your first show and you're confused about this clap magic that we have incorporated for years into the podcast. Because there's probably people out there that are stunned. They're probably Googling, does magic exist right now?
It's incredible technology.
What is clapping?
Anyways, thank you to everybody who supports us. I'm sorry, Leo. Where do they support us?
On what? What is it? Patreon?
That's right. Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Thanks to everybody who supports us over there. At any tier, you can jump in the Discord, which is a bit of a Shangri-La on the internet. And including if you are going to play Monster Hunter Rise and you're looking for a welcoming community to help teach you the ropes, find people to play with, the Monster Hunter community in the Discord is especially friendly, so please check that out. And you can jump in there as well. Sports City tier, you can compete in Trivia Tower to win fun prizes. That's coming up in April here, so if you're into video game trivia, you can check that out. And a big thank you to MinnMax's biggest supporters, Leo's cat.
Yay.
There he is.
Very cute. Also, Will Cornelius. Will Cornelius wants us to know if you own an Android or Tizen OS smartwatch and are looking for a unique watch face with a retro sci-fi futuristic design, you can download the Facer app to your smartphone and check out the creator Cyberpunk. There's over 100 original watch faces featuring neon and metallic backgrounds, unconventional time and date displays, dynamic battery life and stat tracking, a new series of faces based on Dune's great houses, and there are free and premium faces available for $4.99 per month. So thank you so much to Will Cornelius. Check out that Facer app creator Cyberpunk for some funky OS smartwatch backgrounds. Also thanks to our dear friends at I Am 8-Bit who have been huge supporters of everything MinnMax so far. they want everybody to know that you can get the double vinyl soundtrack for Blaseball, which has music by The Garages, the band The Garages. So if you like Blaseball, the online phenomenon, and you want to support I Am 8-Bit because they support us, you can check out the vinyl soundtrack, which comes with mystery vintage style trading cards, wax packs of 5 cards available, and they contain official Blaseball team cards licensed by the Game Band, which is the name of the developers. So thanks so much to I Am 8-Bit. I Am 8-Bit is so great. They have a wonderful online store, and you can use the promo code SPRINGFORWARD, no space, SPRINGFORWARD for 10% off everything under $100 in their wonderful online store. And they're so generous and supportive that they give out a wonderful thing from their online store every single week to whoever we deem has the question of the week submitted over on Patreon. Supporters at any tier can submit a question for us to read on the show, and you can potentially win a great prize from I Am 8-Bit. This week, the winner of Question of the Week wins the almighty 7-inch single Bugsnax vinyl. Isn't that sweet?
Nice.
Remember we talked about it on the show, like that's so smart that I Am 8-Bit's releasing that. And so it is the classic Bugsnax song that we all had in our heads for a majority of last year while we descended into madness. And we'll be shipping. It is Bugsnax. We'll be shipping that out to the winner then for Question of the Week. Y'all ready for this?
Hit us.
Look alive, everybody. Tyler Sticka submits a comment on Patreon or question. He says, looking back at the PlayStation 3 exclusives, I'm struck by how many awesome remaster collections the console received. Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, Echo Shadow of the Colossus, Metal Gear Solid, Zone of the Enders, God of War, Devil May Cry, Hitman, Prince of Persia, Tomb Raider. Many of these run at a higher resolution than the PS2 classic releases on PS4, and some include special features. What was it about the PlayStation 3 that encouraged that approach for re-releases, do you think?
It wasn't so much the PS3, I think, as it was that the PS1 and PS2 look like crap.
Yeah, but it was also that idea of, we don't have to fully remake the game at this point, especially for the PS2 collections. Like, okay, we'll get, some external partner, every once in a while, the internal team to actually just bring this up to HD, slap that HD name on here, and we can sell these things over and over again. Whereas now it's kind of murkier about what it is. But back then it was super exciting of like, what? Prince of Persia in HD? Zone of the Enders in HD? It's such a clear sell.
Yeah, it's
because they all look like butt.
Well, not so.
I mean, just the field was less crowded, right? It seemed like such an obvious move to like, okay, let's put all these old games that were in SD, just put them into HD. Whereas now I feel like you're kind of getting into like more obscure games. It's not quite yet time to re-release some of those HD collections, so it's getting harder to like justify an HD release of a game that is already in HD. So. I think that's just like, oh, we can do this and people will buy them. I think like they realized that during the PS3 era.
Right. Turns out it made a lot of sense. Yeah. And now a lot of those things, are kind of locked on that generation. Danger Zone asks, does anyone remember Mag on the PlayStation 3? I rented it for a weekend, thought it was neat, and never thought about it again. Fun weekend though. Yeah, I remember playing the demo for Mag. Massive Action Game. Did anybody else play Mag with 256 players? Was that the hook?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
But it kind of splits you up into distinct fights anyway, right?
Yeah, that was
part of like 8-person squads or whatever. And I think as you leveled up, you got to control more and more of the battlefield. I think at some point you were just like a general, and I think I don't know if you even shot people at that point. It was just like you were the commander telling people where to go on the map.
Right.
It's kind of an interesting concept, but I just don't think that it was interesting for a lot of people. Like, who would support a game mode with more than 16 players? That's unheard of.
Yeah, it was just kind of an interesting workaround to the limitations at the time. So it was like, oh my God, there are these huge fights, but not really.
It certainly worked. I mean, the fact that it's this memorable and we can make fun of that hook of like, okay, huge player counts, big deal. But I mean, the fact that I was not a big first-person shooter guy, and it was very clearly on my radar, like, what is this, Mag? Oh, I might have to check out this PS3. Like, Zipper got the job done just with a clean hook for the PS3 back then.
I love the idea.
Yeah, it's definitely there.
Yeah.
Owen McCarter writes in, he says, with Vita on its way out and the 3DS being discontinued, would you like to see another handheld console in the market besides the Switch? If so, what would that console look like, and who is making it?
I remember I want to say I mentioned this before, but like I don't know that I want to see like a new line of like a new Vita effectively, but what I would want to do is just like, here's a way to play the games we're already playing but portable, right? Like just a Switch for every platform, like a PS4 Switch or a PS5 Switch, or like just a portable version that lets me play games that I'm already playing now.
Right. I mean, basically what the Vita was, where you could stream PS4 games to it, right?
Yeah. Like ideally they would be native, so the screen resolution wouldn't be like, weird or streaming or, pixelated or whatever. But that would be as much as what I would want, is just have a way to play those games on the go, even though that's, not something that's really appealing right now. Eventually, I have to hope that I will go outside again.
Yeah.
Even like not the on the go, like I like my Switch for on the couch gaming, where I can just kind of be curled up with it right here, and I'm not taking up, the entire TV, and I'm still kind of in the living room doing other things, but also playing a game.
You're like half parenting.
Yes, half parenting, correct. Yeah, but I've realized there's just something that's nice about kind of being that close, and it almost like it makes the game more intimate, like it's kind of just this cozy little thing that you can sit down and focus on, and that feels different from, either PC gaming or normal console gaming on a television.
Yeah, for sure. Ben Shively writes in, he says, happy Resident Evil 25th anniversary week
To you.
Mazel tov.
to celebrate. Do any of you have any memorable games or moments with the series that stick out? Memorable games or moments? I mean, all of them are memorable, but yeah, does one really pop out for folks?
If I remember it, it's memorable. I was blown away by Resident Evil 4 on my cousin's CRT in their basement.
Oh my
God.
God.
Game was unbelievably good looking and terrifying. I was so impressed by that game.
Do you remember like what the first section you saw was over there?
That first time you're pushed back in that building by all of the townspeople that I forget all of the relevant nouns for. But yeah, when the chainsaw guy busts into the house.
Was it like a spooky basement too?
I don't know if there was a spooky.
No,
It had
not
a really
the
nice
game.
basement. It was newly finished.
Oh, that's less interesting. You
It's
want like
cozy,
scary
yeah.
basement where you don't know what's happening. Like that was what it was for me with, I would be staying at my friend Danny's house, and his older brother was obsessed with Resident Evil 2. And so myself and baby best friend Ronnie, we just watched his brother play through all of Resident Evil 2. And it was like just that perfect tone of like, this game looks sweet. It's a little too mature for how old we are right now. And Danny's older brother was, I'm sure it hasn't aged well, but in our minds at the time, the funniest person on earth. Like every joke he said killed. So it was the world's greatest Let's Play I've ever seen. I would kill to actually have it recorded just to see how entertaining that actually was. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 blew my mind back in the day.
Yeah, I was also like, a friend brought Resident Evil 4 over, and it was weird because I didn't really have a ton of Resident Evil experience up until then, but he was like, man, they turned it into an action game. And he literally, like, I think he was already like most of the way through it. And so he just showed me like the last couple of acts, which is where that game is the most action based. And I was like, oh, okay, see, this maybe I can get into. And then I remember just playing through that game like multiple times, getting like the hand cannon and like the infinite rocket launcher and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And just like, that was one of those games that I think made me love like repeating games over and over again, of just like, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to play this game again and again just to have it, go different ways and get new unlockable bonuses and stuff.
Totally. Yeah, Leo, that was my infamous. Yeah, where I finished Resident Evil 4. It's like, well, time to start over. Like, it's rare that I do this, but I will just not stop playing this game.
Yeah. Favorite memory though, it has to be with Resident Evil 2 Remake. My friend Jake was over playing, fighting one of the early bosses and running around gathering ammo, running out, desperate, no health items, last bullet. He aims at the boss and says, "One shot, one kill," and shoots it perfectly in the head, and it goes to like the boss killed cutscene. That was such a hilarious, victorious moment.
That's amazing. Paradise Inc. writes in, he says, whatever happened to the Randy Pitchford scandal? Seems like everything has been swept under the rug. Wonderful question. This was early of last year. Who can forget where we were when we learned that Randy Pitchford left a thumb drive in what was the name of that?
Magic Castle?
No, not Magic Castle. What is it?
Medieval Times.
Medieval Times. Thank you. I think it's
Some
kind of
people
like,
are just so likable.
I guess it was kind of like a self-contained little scandal. Like, that's weird. And it was part of that ongoing litigation that is always confusing and surrounding Gearbox. But I don't think there was like a lasting impact, right, Jeffem?
No, it certainly doesn't seem, at least either, socially either. It seems like people just kind of forgot about. There were a lot of scandals in the past 2 years that I guess that one just people got over.
Yeah, it's wild to me.
Threw down the smoke bomb and it went off, and
Yeah, it is. I almost feel like it's a weird thing where when you say the Randy Pitchford scandal, I ask which one, because there's the one with the thumb drive. There's the one where him and his assistant had this huge fight where the guy I think was like stealing from them or whatever, like him and his wife, right?
There's the Claptrap voice actor who's also high up at the studio who was suing him. I think that's where maybe this whole thing emanated from, and then it was brought onto Piff the Magic Dragon's Magic podcast. Like, it's such a weird thing. But I was fascinated with the news that Gearbox was acquired by Embracer Group, all hail Embracer Group, this year. That like they had a video where I forget who the person was from Embracer Group, or maybe it was an interview. But like he was very direct in being like, with this decision, we are acquiring Gearbox, merging with Gearbox is how they're phrasing it, but realistically it seems like an acquisition. Anyways, but he very much phrased it as like, we are investing in Gearbox and we are investing in doubling down and believing in Randy Pitchford. And like it was amazing just to like have this huge corporation be like, this guy who in the past has been a bit of a loose cannon, we believe in him, and to really put it out on Front Street is a bold move on their part.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing where it's like, I think people are kind of like, oh, Randy Pitchford, I don't know. But he's kind of in enough of a position where it's like, I don't know, like I feel like people have done the legwork, but it's like, I don't know what we're supposed to do about it at this point. Like we've had that conversation. He's not going to get ousted from the company at this point. Like Embracer has, like you said, doubled down on him. So it's like, there's not much else to do. So it's like, there's not much else to say unless some new development comes up, which is, I don't know. It does feel like a weird place to leave that off, but
yeah, I'm very curious to see with the Borderlands movie going to be gaining heat and filming and releasing. Like, I want to know what that wording is like, what the messaging is to Randy Pitchford about like, shut your frickin' mouth. Like when this movie's coming out, everyone's on best behavior, because there is a very good chance that movie will be a gigantic blockbuster. And to have like, imagine like the success of a Jumanji, which is sharing half the cast confusingly, but like the success of a Jumanji movie, except if like the main creative voice behind Jumanji was like this wild card, like there'd be so much tension on that success in Hollywood that I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic.
I can't imagine he ends up in it, but it would be funny if he was somehow in that movie.
He's going to have a cameo.
Absolutely. He'll be a psycho in the background, right?
Yeah. So they're just going to show his scene from In and of Itself where he's in the crowd again.
Just cut to that. That is true. He was in a major film this year with In and of Itself on Hulu. That is so weird. Jake Zielsdorf writes in and he asks, do you believe there's such a thing as good taste, or does everyone just have different taste? Great question, Jake.
For sure.
Yeah, I think it is kind of like a mixture of both, where even as you like something, you can say like, oh, this feels like specifically tailored for me. Where it's like, I like this, but I don't know that other people would like it, as much as I think Dota is one of the greatest games of all time. It's like a game that I don't actively recommend to people that much. Because I feel like this is something that is to my personal taste, but I don't know that there's like an objective part of that feels like, oh, this is objectively good.
It is. I mean, you look at the amount of people playing and enjoying Dota. I think it's very fair to say Dota 2 is objectively good, right?
Right. Well, but also it's like, it is good. It is like amazing for like a certain subset of people, right? Like it's not a game. It's not for everyone, right?
Sure.
Like I think you can kind of like, even as you're saying that I really like this, but I don't know that like it is a universally appealing thing. So I think you can have like taste, but it's it's not, there is no objective standard, but you do kind of like think about how you enjoy different things.
It's all different taste, and where people's different tastes overlap is what good taste is, or what we consider good taste. It's just those are the things that we agree on. And then we think, oh, well, I have good taste, but it's really just we both like this thing for whatever reason. And if enough people do it, and then there's like that upper threshold where if too many people like it, then they're, then it's mainstream, and then it's supposedly bad again.
Skyrim.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think good can be objective in any situation. I don't think you can measure good.
I think there is some aspect of it because I always kind of I don't necessarily want to say like the thing that the most people like is the best thing, because that's not always like, that's almost for me not usually the case, where it's like, well, then why aren't, like, you know, I think then categorically the highest rated games on Metacritic are objectively the best games, right? And that's always because of a skewed, you know, who's reviewing it or whatever. But it's like there is some like consensus you know, kind of appeal, and, you know, personal quality is they're like kind of two different things. It just means that, like, if a game is really rated highly, it just means that it's easy to like versus like better than other games. I don't know.
Yeah.
There it is, Jake. Ramses Garcia writes in. He says, how fast are you guys going to buy the Switch Pro when it comes out later this year?
I mean, if they let me.
If the law lets Serial buy it. I mean, that thing. It's legal. The Switch is still sold out everywhere, right? Like, this thing is going to be so hard to get. But yeah, I'm eager to buy it. I'm definitely not one of those people that buys like every version of the 3DS, but I'm a soft Nintendo upgrade kind of guy. So yeah, I will get it at some point for sure. And it seems like rumors are heating up again throughout this last week that like people banging on drums. This thing exists. It's coming sooner than you think.
We said it was coming for the past 5 years, so now when it happens, we called it.
It was announced before the Switch, which was really weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is almost similar to like the whole Wii HD thing, right? Where people were like, there's going to be a Wii HD, and it didn't happen for years and years until they made the Wii U. And it's like, oh, it is both accurate and to some degree more disappointing than we could have imagined. But I feel like they're going to be a little more conservative on this one, where it's just like, yeah, it's a better way to run Switch games. But, you know, we'll see how that goes, because it's like, Nintendo is being so just like obscenely secretive about everything they're doing in the next few months, besides like the tidbits that they're willing to say, like, this game's coming out this year, because we know for sure it'll happen, right?
Yeah. Get a load of this one. Andrew King. I'm sorry, don't get a load of this. We're not ready yet. Andrew King writes in, he says, I just finished playing Doom Eternal's new DLC, and no spoilers, but it kind of seems like a conclusion to Doomslayer's story. And certainly an end to his arc in Doom Eternal. How do y'all feel about expansions like this, the kind that act as a curtain call for the games as a whole? Do you prefer this or Horizon Zero Dawn, where the expansion is set during the course of the main game and basically functions as a lengthy side campaign?
Side stuff for sure. I want it to be contained on the disc, or at least in the download.
Unless it's one of those situations where it's very clear that they're not getting another entry, and it's like, okay, if the team is desperate to wrap up a storyline, you know, a little bit Death of the Outsider, it seems like, right? Like, okay, let's go ahead.
Even that was its own separate game, though.
That is true.
It wasn't a piece of DLC. Like although I did actually, like, Dishonored did have those two really excellent DLCs where you played as Dowd, who was like a different character with his own like skill set. But it's weird that I think Asura's Wrath is like the game that does both of those examples. Where like the actual ending of that game is DLC, and it's kind of disappointing in that sense. But then they I think the two DLCs they released after that were where Asura fought Ryu and Akuma, which are way better DLC concepts, where it's just like, we're just going to take this character that has just become like, you know, an unstoppable force, and we are pitting him against two immovable objects, right? And there were totally the sections where you were basically playing as Asura in like a rundown version of the Street Fighter 4 engine against Ryu, which is just like a fun thing for me that, again, I like it a lot. I don't know that I would recommend it to anyone who, other than people who really like Asura's Wrath and Street Fighter. Yeah. But like, that is just like the exact kind of thing I want to see. It's just like, let's just go nuts on what we can do with this concept. But then, also it has the really bad, like, pay to unlock the rest of this game thing. Right.
Hey, Surreal. It was my get a load of this maybe last week, I think, but it's Harada's Bar. Harada from Tekken fame and his new YouTube channel, which is still fascinating. But in that, he was talking about how Tekken was awarded the world record from Guinness for the longest running continuous storyline in video games. And it was 25 years at that point. And it definitely gave me pause. Like, what? That seems very odd. Because
very specific.
Yeah, you could count like Metal Gear from MSX through Metal Gear Solid 5, and that would be longer than that.
Yeah, I think maybe they were just, It's weird because I would even count Mortal Kombat as being that, but it's
there's a reboot.
Well, like the thing is, like, yeah, it is a reboot, but also it's like they contextualize the reboot as like, okay, it is like in some sense technically still part of that same through line because it's like there's a thing in Armageddon that triggers the reboot canonically.
Okay,
but it's like. Yeah, I don't know. I don't take too much stock in Genius records, especially when you read more about how they're kind of made.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there are ways to disprove that. But
yeah,
tech has been running for a while.
There's got to be some PC old game that technically the story is still continuing that I'm not thinking of. But there's got to be some biggies out there. But please leave a comment. Let us know.
I would be curious to see what they're kind of like. Well, this is how we justify giving it to them.
Right. And we're Guinness. Christian Jimenez submits a question on Patreon. He asks, have you noticed that when using quick resume, it throws off the internal time of games? I noticed when I was playing Hyperdot, shout out to Hyperdot, and it said I had close to 350 hours, even though I've played like 5 or 6 by my count. As someone who likes personal stats about my gaming habits on a scale of 1 through 10, how egregious is this and who will fix it at Microsoft? Great question. I haven't noticed that personally, but I am weirdly obsessed, with that hours played. Like specifically on Steam, I really love having a somewhat accurate read. I mean, it's probably just from podcasting and being able to say like, oh, I love Valheim. I've played 35 hours at this point so far, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the game with quick resume stuff, because I think some games acknowledge that better than others, where some games won't count that clock and some people do. It's even like as much as like, oh, if you like press the home screen on a Switch game or something, some games will continue, some games won't. I don't think there's for some reason, there's no standard on whether or not that happens. And I'm also kind of obsessive about my play stats. So I hate it. I definitely do hate it when games do that. Which is a real bummer. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And to the point where I wish more games could figure out if I'm asleep on the couch or not and still have the game up.
Please.
Like I think Final Fantasy VII Remake had the best version of it because they actually showed you the clock and then it would kind of gray out and it would stop counting if you were idle for like a couple minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a weird, like, I can't imagine what that conversation was like of like, no, we need to dedicate 1 or 2 days to this feature, which is like a thing that's really cool. But I can't, like, what is the value of that except for, in these kind of marginal spaces? Like, how much better did that make the game, right?
Twice as good, I'd argue. That's why I won Game of the Year, probably.
Yeah, we have that shirt that says like, it's timer that stops, timer that stops, timer that stops.
That's right. Tim Conlon writes in and he says, Benjamin MinnMax, that's from the deepest dive in Arkham Asylum, everybody. He asks, what are some of your favorite transitions in gamings? Maybe gameplay shifts in a significant way, unexpected playable character changes, or a new area to explore. Personally, I love the Lego DLC intro in Forza Horizon 4. There's a really fun transition from the real world into the Lego world. This is a nice reminder that I need to play that Lego DLC. I love Forza Horizon. I love Lego. I love the idea of that DLC, and I've just never gotten back to it, but I need to go back into that in this next week. But gameplay transitions. The one that immediately jumps to mind for me is so specific, and tell me if I'm nuts for loving this as much as I do, but I just haven't seen it done this way before. But in the new God of War, the latest God of War, is my favorite thing where, I don't know if it's the first time you get there, but when you're in the boat and kind of in that watery hub islandy area, Atreus is talking about all the different things you can do. Like, oh, we could go here, or we could do, what Freya wants us to do and go over here, blah, blah, blah. And then Atreus goes, what are we going to do next? And then Kratos just goes, I'll show you. And then it just transitions to gameplay. And it's like my favorite thing, the idea that he just says, I'll show you. And then literally it's, now I actually have to show Atreus what we're doing. Like it's such a cool, subtle way of putting you directly in control of that character.
I liked the Grand Theft Auto 5 switching characters conceptually.
Right.
But it just takes so long.
Did they speed that up in the later versions?
Maybe a little bit, but it's still longer than I ever want it to be.
Right. Ooh, I wonder if in the PS5 version, if that's going to be a big selling point. It's just going to be like diggity, coming back in and out. That'd be so fun to see.
It's going to rocket down so fast that like the character just collapses onto the pavement when it hits him.
Yep, that's how it works.
Every time.
Quentin Cassidy says, as of Tuesday morning, Microsoft looks poised to buy Discord. Good God. Do you think this purchase would mean anything for Xbox owners?
It better.
Frickin' better.
God, the idea of Microsoft buying Discord is so funny because they would have to get rid of Skype, right?
Just integrated into Skype. What if it just becomes Skype at that point?
They just, I mean, Discord is a much better name recognition than Skype, but I'm still fascinated by it. There is a book in the downfall of Skype when last year should have been the biggest Skype year in the world. Like start of 2020, it was the go-to video call reference. It was the Kleenex of video calls.
Yep.
And somehow it craps the bed. I don't understand it.
It was such a horrible application. I hated using it so much.
It was rough.
You gotta figure like all the Skype team members were like, Zoom? What is Zoom? What is this Zoom everyone's talking about?
Right.
Yeah, I remember when we used to work at Game Informer, I think those laptops were loaded with Skype for Business. And that has to be the application I hate most ever. Of just like how it started every time. For some reason, every time I tried to say like, don't start this, don't turn this on at startup, it would somehow come back. The login screen took forever, and I never used it because anytime I actually wanted to use it for like an interview or something, they were just like, we can just do regular Skype. And it's like, well, I don't know how to get this. Like I had different usernames. Yeah. It was awful.
It is.
I would always take some time off from using Skype and go, is it as bad as I remember? Am I being too harsh on it? And then I'd have to use it for a Game Informer interview or something. And just absolute nightmare application.
I also did have like this weird like a moment where I think there's at one point where Skype let you have statuses or whatever. And I was just being like, I thought I was being real clever by just like writing literally just farted as my status.
Oh no.
And like I forgot about using Skype years after that. And there was a video interview that I was doing for Game Informer that was like, I'll just use my personal thing. And then it's like my status was just showing literally just farted. And I was during the call, I was scrambling to like, okay, I need to change that immediately before they notice.
And then they noticed that it updated and they're like, I guess he farted a while ago. And
farted 5 years ago. Phew.
I mean,
while we're ragging on Skype, I still to this day get multiple emails from Skype every month telling me that my subscription to like international Skype or whatever it couldn't go through and I'm not going to be able to do it anymore. And it turned out that my Skype account got hacked at some point and someone used it to buy like international credits, probably to make arrange a drug deal or something like that. But I couldn't log back into it, and I contacted like their customer support multiple times, and they were like, no, don't worry, like whoever like hacked your account back then is also locked out of it. Like we have super tight security protocols, but they can't give me access back to it.
That's how tight it is.
And so there's nothing that I can do. And I told them like, I just delete the account or just shut it down because I don't have access to it. And they're like, no, we can't do that either. And so I will just get emails until the end of time telling me that my Skype money has run out and that my subscription won't last.
But don't worry, Mr. Marchiafavo. We can assure you that your account has just farted. So that will remain.
Yes. Yeah, good thing I didn't add that to my
that is definitely like a use case for like why you should regularly update your passwords, and how like just having information on one account will just like, I forgot to use this application and I just totally forgot to like sunset it, and it's come back to bite me. Like at some point there's going to be some really massive version of that's even like larger than anything we've had before. Just like, well, in 50 years Google will be gone or something, and like it turns out someone got a hold of all that info somehow,
Right. We forget how much we offload to that. Yeah.
But to the actual question, though, I think they said that, or what I saw said that it was like a deal for $10 billion.
Yeah,
just a rumor, though.
Yes, just a
rumor.
And
they still might not sell to anyone.
Yeah,
yeah.
But I feel like 10 billion, like Microsoft could spend that money somewhere else, and I'm sure they're not just doing it for like the Xbox division, but it's like, what developer could you not buy for $10 billion at that point?
Right.
Isn't that better than,
Sony Santa Monica?
Than this technology that you already have, even if you really don't like Skype?
Right. I mean,
The
people.
smart thing I think for them to do would be you don't want to have people like have to make a new account for this thing when you put Discord on people's Xbox dashboards. It should be like if you have an Xbox account, you already have a Discord account and you're logged in automatically on Xbox. We're changing party chat to be Discord and we're making the brands like synergized.
Yeah.
Right. So all Xbox interactions online are like through a Discord.
Yeah. The best thing that can come of it is that like you can just hop on a Discord server with someone who's already using the Xbox network. So that like it is just basically cross compatible and seamless or whatever. Just like I can log on to my Discord and chat with someone who's playing an Xbox game, right? Like that's maybe the best use scenario, but I wonder if this is less of a like, oh, let's make Xbox better using this, and more like let's just invest in Sunset Sky finally.
Yeah, people bring it up in the Backstage Pass watching us live that Microsoft Teams has replaced Skype for Business, and they say that it's actually pretty okay. But yeah, also a lot of people hoping that Discord doesn't sell. As long as, Trivia Tower remains pure. And now maybe people can play from their Xbox Series S dashboard, so that'll be cool. Mark Poley writes in, he says, thank you for introducing me to the phrase oofta. Somehow, after the last show, it immediately slipped into my lexicon. It feels so natural. Unfortunately, everyone in the UK will think you're crazy if you start using it, and they'll shun you. I'm sorry, Mark, but I'm glad people are enjoying oofta. Yeah, oofta, getting shunned. No good.
Yeah, I like the visual of you saying that and everyone around you just like casually like turning around and not facing you, crossing their arms, giving you the cold shoulder, just like on command.
Stephen Lamson submits a question on Patreon. He says, we all know the lie the Batman is spreading about him not killing people. The amount of radiation, X-rays he's using to see people's skeletons will almost guarantee their death slowly and painfully, especially when he forgets to turn off detective vision. Anyway, why do you think we're all so fascinated by X-ray vision despite its impractical crime-fighting ability? It was even used in the latest Marvel miniseries, minor spoiler. Is it because of the glasses that came with old magazines? Is it because perverts just want to see through people's clothes? Remember that video after the Kinect came out where people claimed it could see through your clothes? Are we all just idiots? Yeah, number one, perverts. Number two, a curiosity about skeletons, probably.
I think it's 90% perverts, and I think human beings just don't like things that we can't see or know. And I feel like that's like an easy kind of psychological hack of like, oh, now I can see everything.
I've always been suspicious about our skeletons, but now I can finally see the skeletons.
The weird thing about perverts, and I have a lot of thoughts on this, but
the one weird thing about perverts.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with these dirty magazines they're talking about, or I know they're just kid magazines on the back and stuff, but like, even if you got those X-ray glasses from the old magazines, like, is it that hot to see an attractive person's skeleton?
Or that's why they call it boners, right?
Oh, yeah. Surreal Vasquez. No, but it's not like an X-ray vision just like removes their clothes and they're just sitting there naked.
It's not like that image is inherently sexy. It's just like, yeah, check out this skeleton.
Right. If you like a pelvis,
be like a slider, right? Where it's like the intent. If you turn the intensity up to max, it's like you just see like their nervous system and soul. But like if you turn it down, it's like, well, at some point,
think about how sensitive that slider would have to be. Where it's like, ooh, skin hot. Then you just go a millimeter too far and it's like, yeah, it's just like blood and muscles and gross crap squirting.
Yeah, I think you guys are taking the X-ray part of X-ray vision too seriously. I think
literally X-rays are like your skeleton, right?
Stuff. Yeah. That's where the name came from. But I think in terms of like the glasses, and most people when they think of the ability, it's not just I can now see skeletons. Period. It's I can see through stuff that is normally opaque.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this question was going to be about detective vision style stuff in games. I kind of question this premise that the society is more obsessed with X-rays than we should be. I think this is the first conversation about X-ray vision I've been a part of in 10 years.
Maybe it's quietly simmering. I think it's largely coming from
Leo. That just means you're the one person who's not a pervert. So congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you don't just go to the doctor's office and look at that X-ray board and just be like, ooh, and then kind of like bite your lower lip like the rest of us.
I don't know what kind of organs are in there.
Vincent Pavey writes in and he asks, hey, should Quake Champions come to Xbox?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't stop them. I swear on this podcast, I will do nothing to stop Quake Champions coming to Xbox.
I do think it is a good idea.
I saw that as a potential question last night, and I immediately had to look up what Quake Champions is, and then I was surprised that it had come out.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Years ago, right?
I didn't know what version that was. But I was a big fan of Quake Live back in the day.
Yeah.
Which was like the browser, like I think it had its own launcher, but it was just basically you play through a browser, and it had like really good stat tracking for everything. Like it kept stats of every single match that you ever played and stuff. And I appreciate the old school Quake version, so there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
I bet it's fun.
And hey, maybe a new show plus idea. Just keep this Bethesda thing rolling, going back and getting into Quake Champions. That'd be interesting.
And it's called I Bet It's Fun.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Put it in the poll for Patreon. But I could see that if Microsoft wanted to wring something new out of the acquisition, that seems like a port that'd be doable technically. Anyways, Ben Cooper.
Just do Quake Live. Ben Cooper submits a question, interesting one. He says, "What's up, Minners and Maxers? Hello." He says, "Naruto boy."
Naruto.
I'm sorry, Naruto boy. No, Naruto boy is coming to Game Pass on March 30th. The game has had very little hype, and it baffles me why. The gameplay, music, and graphics are stellar. Maybe it's just the name. It's absolutely the name. He says, anyways, I hope you all check it out when it arrives and have a blast entering the digital synth world of the 80s. I saw this, Ben Cooper, and then I Googled, what the hell is Naruto boy? He ain't kidding. It really looks sweet. It's got a really great art style instead of just some pixelated 80s crap. It's like a new flavor of pixelated 80s crap that looks really fresh and cool.
Yeah, Google refuses me to let me Google this properly. It keeps suggesting Naruto.
I know. That's probably a reason it's having a tough time. But I'm excited to check it out. It's coming out on Switch and PC, I believe, as well. Okay. Tommen.gif says, hey, CLCs, everyone is hyped about that Forspoken trailer. One of the things I don't hear a lot talk about that I'm really excited for is the spell we saw with roots coming out of the ground. Okay, so if you missed it, last week, Project Athia, which was revealed as the PlayStation exclusive Square Enix IP that's from Luminous Productions, which was the studio that the people who were brought on to finish Final Fantasy 15 split off to create within Square. So Project Athia is officially renamed Forspoken. I think it looks awesome. It's about a lady gets transported to a magical world. She's dodging dragons, and it seems very keen on mobility, running around, dashing through the environment. It looks incredible. And yeah, the end of the trailer, she has this spell where like roots come out of the ground. Also, I mentioned it during the reaction stream, but fun fact is Forspoken and Project Athia, they've been working on it for so long. Like we saw a teaser clip of the game that would eventually become Project Athia, and this would have been early 2016, like January 2016, I think. And the clip back then, it wasn't like the same main character here, but I remember thinking it looked like Katniss from Hunger Games, where it was her, and she was running along what looked like kind of like a British subway, like kind of like a brick curved wall. And she had arrows in a little quiver. And it was like a real quick shot of that. So we saw that way back then. So it's so cool that it's now coming out and it's called Forspoken, but I'm very excited about that. Anyways, Tommen.gif writes in and he wants to know, or he says, most spells, games tend to have the same very samey effect, but that seemed really unique and fun. What's your favorite spell to cast in a game? He personally is a big fan of Levitate and Morrowind. It's a good question. Maybe it's just because we just played it not too long ago with The Deepest Dive, but Chrono Trigger, Luminaire, what's it called? Chrono's move. It doesn't look too fantastic, but like at that point in the game when you get it, it's just like, all right, this is going to damage everybody for a ridiculous amount. I like ice spells personally, even if you want to be drastic and carry it over into main Overwatch. I like ice walls. I know they're frustrating to fight against, but it's very satisfying to have that big of an impact. You can really annoy a lot of people with that.
Telekinesis and Oblivion, picking up objects and moving them. I don't know if there's a single practical purpose for it in that game. But it was cool that you could learn that spell and do it.
Yeah.
If you guys want to zone out for a sec, Sunstrike in Dota 2 is one of the better spells because so it's Invoker fires off a laser, like an orbital cannon basically from the sun that fires off a sunspot. But the thing is that like it takes a second to actually land and you can fire it anywhere on the map. And so there's like a delay on it so that you basically have to predict where the opponent is. But it's really cool when you kill someone with Sunstrike because it's like, oh, I predicted where you were going. And now you guys can wake up.
Oh, thank you. Though it's so helpful for meditation to have white noise like that.
Yeah. Dan submits a question on Patreon saying, to kill time during this pandemic, I've put together a few jigsaw puzzles. Occasionally, hang on, stop the podcast, shut off the camera. There has to be a jigsaw puzzle with Jigsaw from Saw's face on it, right?
Of course.
Okay. Anyways, so he said he put together a couple jigsaw puzzles. Occasionally there will be two pieces already correctly put together, either from somebody doing the puzzle previously or it just never got separated from the factory. What's the right thing to do in this situation? Is it cheating to leave them put together? Or should I take them apart and mix them in with the rest of the pieces? I'm losing sleep. Please help. Yeah, we're here to help, Dan.
You gotta take them apart.
Yep.
You gotta put them all out on the table, flip them all over so that they're upside down.
What?
Shuffle them all up, and then flip them all over.
Eat them.
And then you
eat them.
Yep.
Yeah. Put them in a bowl and eat them like potato chips.
And then finish it and then draw Jigsaw from the Saw series on top of whatever the artwork is.
No, you your own picture and frame it.
I've literally just had the situation. I put together a couple puzzles recently and it's like, you absolutely have to break it up. It's cheating. The point is to connect it. If you order ingredients for food and it comes half prepared, that's not an analogy that works.
Well, if you buy ingredients at the store and you come in and there's several peanut butter sandwiches there, you're not just gonna like, well, I have to take these apart.
No, you do. You take the bread apart and you scrape the peanut butter off and you somehow distill it to separate the peanut butter and the jelly. Yeah, it's not a real puzzle unless you do it from square one, Dan. Leo, you're looking there, not judging Dan.
Shame on you.
Thank you. Edgar Vasquez writes in and he says, what's with my brother? He says, what word or phrase created for video games is the most widely known in pop culture? Phrases like Battle Royale and words like Mario were in use before their video game equivalents. But what is the number one? He says it has to be
Spin Dash.
He guesses it has to be Pac-Man. I mean, names, that's confusing, but I like video game centric phrases. Like what has made that leap the best?
I feel like there's got to be a go-to answer for like a verb that maybe emerged from video games.
I mean,
I feel like power up.
Yeah, level up. Game over has to be huge, right?
That's true, but what game is that from?
Aliens.
That's ironic.
Yeah, but that probably originated from a video game, right?
Yeah, I don't think people
Honestly,
playing.
I don't know.
What, people playing solitaire in 1432 were like, I got a game over.
Yeah, chess.
Is that how like tennis ends, or
no?
The ref just yells, "Game over!"
Game over. What, lives?
No, because I feel like that's
lives.
Yeah.
Life? Did video games create life?
I don't know that they didn't.
Double jump.
Extra life.
Yeah. Leo, do you think your wonderful mommy Vader, has she ever heard the phrase double jump in her life?
Yeah.
Do you think?
I think so.
So what do you think it is? I mean, the names, I don't know.
Yeah, names don't count.
I'm leaning game over.
What's the exact question again? Just phrase from games?
What's up with my brother? Words or phrases created for video games that are most widely known in pop culture.
I want to run like we should run like an engram search on Google to see when game over was like first a phrase.
I mean, it's probably Space Invaders.
Says you, Hanson.
Yeah, that's true. Jeff,
I just have a hard time believing was never said before that.
I mean, yeah, because there were so many games, and every game has a state in which it's over. Is it
game
unbelievable
over?
that-
Great job, my friend.
Yeah.
For instance.
I don't know. I mean, but it is a weird thing to say. Like, is there a chance that it comes from like Japanese arcade games, just like a weird translation? Whereas in the American arcade games, it says, "Thank you so much for playing. We look forward to you coming back." But your current round has ended.
Plus 7% endurance.
Look, let's all do our research. We have 1 week.
Hold on.
We'll each do a week's worth of research.
Yeah.
Epic,
bro.
Epic.
Do you think the game Fortnite has brought the term Fortnite back into prominence?
Yeah.
It has probably created an epidemic of people spelling it wrong.
That is absolutely true. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that has to be all over the place. Yeah, because everybody trying to recite Lincoln's speeches now, there's going to be a mess.
Yeah, I wonder how many kids who play Fortnite know what an actual Fortnite is, though.
Hang on.
Sounds like a man on the street segment.
Hello. Oh, I can't imagine how gross doing a man on the street segment would be right now. Excuse me, can we run up to you real quick? No. Jeff Enright writes in. He says, "Hey, MinnMaxers, I hope all is well." It's pretty good. I have one simple question for you today. What is your favorite Netflix exclusive movie or television series? Don't think too hard, just gut reaction. Go. He says, for me, it's Afterlife, the Ricky Gervais series, and the Trial of the Chicago 7 film. Netflix exclusive series, it's Restaurants on the Edge. It's just the worst show that I've watched every episode of. It ain't good.
Okja.
What's
probably my favorite original Netflix content.
What is that?
It's from the director of Parasite, Bong Joon-ho, your favorite movie.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm hip. I'm cool. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's about this family who is tasked with looking after this super pig for this corporation, and they raise it, and then it comes collecting the nicest one. And it's it's a girl and her animal story, except the animal is this very cute, very convincing CG super pig. And God, I knew I liked it, but I watched it again recently, and it's just like scene after scene is just perfect.
Yeah.
I don't want to say a single other thing about it.
That's nice. In the Backstage Pass, Joseph Dowdy says comedians in cars, which would probably be my answer, but at the same time, that's a Crackle joint that Netflix stole from the fine folks at Crackle.
Yeah.
That's a Crackle Jack.
I like BoJack Horseman a lot. I like the first season of Narcos. The rest of the seasons are like good to fine, but I think that first season is really cool. Glow ended recently, but I like that quite a bit. I'd have to look at what other exclusives there are.
Well, there's the Dota anime serial.
That's true.
How was that? You watched it, right?
It's okay. I don't know. It feels like, it's a little too crowded, but yeah.
Crowded.
I liked the Mindhunter.
Oh, the Fincher thing?
Yeah. That was good. I know we really hyped it up during that Netflix E3 show that we did, but Grace and Frankie is legitimately just a great comedy.
Oh, nice.
With like huge, like all-time stars in it, in like completely different roles than you've ever seen them in. And it's just a genuinely very funny show that you wouldn't expect, like a show about senior citizens getting old and, finding like a second life and friendship and things like that to be, as witty and entertaining and kind of touching as it is.
Yeah.
That reminds me, Netflix games, they haven't announced anything in a long time, have they? It was like Dark Crystal Age of Tactics early last year.
Certainly not Grace and Frankie the video game, which
Where
just
is
won't.
it? Come on. Rockstar, make the game.
I mean, they're partnering with Joseph Fares to make it, one of those co-op games. It takes both Grace and Frankie.
The worst DLC of all time.
Yeah. No, I actually totally remembered Roma, which is probably my favorite thing.
Oh, sure.
Netflix has done. Yeah.
That was the Netflix original?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
The
Irishman.
Santa Clarita Diet, really funny. Really recommend it. Even though it kind of got cut off and canceled. And the ending is okay where it's at.
Yeah.
But very funny show.
I mean, all of those shows have such a tough hurdle to get over, 2 or 3 seasons? Because it's understandable. Like, they want the splash of the reveal, but is it really worth it to keep these shows stringing along?
Netflix says, they've said we don't make more money for doing more than 3 seasons.
Yeah.
There's like no reason to do it.
Yeah. But it kind of makes for nicer, shorter, more focused stories in some ways.
Yeah, it's just like the way they kind of unceremoniously do that, right? Versus like, okay, you have 3 seasons, do whatever you want, instead of like, well, we were on season 3, but now it's over. You didn't get the opportunity to actually, end this properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks.
Oh, it reminds me. Yeah, Russian Doll I really liked a lot. And I don't know if they're making more.
They are.
Oh, they are.
Season
Okay.
2, yeah.
Oh, geez, there we go. What do y'all like for a question of the week?
It's not related, but I guess I like that Skype conversation just because it felt like a weight had been lifted.
Yep, I like Skype and Resident Evil. Yeah, I like Skype and I liked
X-ray perverts.
X-ray. Well, I guess. I like the phrase breaking into pop culture. Jeff, which way are you leaning?
Look, we all had a lot to say about Skype, so
Leaning that way?
let's go for it.
All right, congratulations. That's Quentin Cassidy. Question of the week winner. I'm 8-Bit will ship out that 7-inch vinyl for its Bug Snacks. Thank you so much for everybody submitting a question over on Patreon, supporting us at any tier. We appreciate it. Now it's time for something we call Get a Load of This. Serial?
Yeah,
Share the
this
load.
is more of a quick kind of news hit, I guess. But if you remember, Ikumi Nakamura, everyone's favorite E3 stage presenter that was previously working on Ghostwire Tokyo, recently announced that she is forming her own studio.
Right.
And kind of as part of the larger, like the thing that I would recommend is to go watch this short documentary that someone made about it called Ikumi Nakamura Remnant Tour. So where she talks about it, like it's a lot of footage of her walking around and stuff and kind of talking about why she did what she did. It's like pretty in depth in that, like she talks about how like a lot of people at Capcom where I used to work, because she kind of worked on Okami, I think was her first big game. And a lot of people would like sleep at their desks.
Yeah.
It was really harrowing. It was just like a lot of overwork. And even at Tango Gameworks, she was like, well, it's not that bad, but I think people were really passionate and like working on even Ghostwire Tokyo took this kind of huge toll on me mentally and like it wasn't healthy. And she was like, well, I don't want to work on it. Like, I don't want to continue risking my health to work on the game. And so it's kind of like this surprisingly kind of poignant look at, long-term game development where, she kind of ends with like, hey, I want to make my own studio.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth a watch. And it's weird that she mentions like, yeah, I want to hire a bunch of foreigners. I want people who can, I just want creative people and I want to be able to learn how to communicate, across disciplines and see like, like I took the studio tour of a bunch of different places, not for like, oh yeah, like let's hire a bunch of people and see how you work, but like, or like, what you're working on, but more like, how do you work? Like, what is your work environment like? And I think, so it has a lot of like fun insights and is pretty interesting. So
Cool. Yeah. Links below for all these. That's a good one. Jeff?
Get a load of this. We all know Pokemon.
Yes.
But they're so passe nowadays. Nowadays, it's all about Fontemon, which is this game that some evil genius named Michael Mullet created. But basically, he created a playable version of Pokemon, but it's all contained within a font. And so you can actually just load the font in a word processor. And then as you type buttons, it kind of creates the game and moves you through like an entire Pokemon style game with he made his own Pokemon and everything.
Jesus.
And I guess he said that the way that it works is kind of like how, there are certain like combinations of letters that you can type that it will kind of merge them together. And he used that technology within fonts to like add animations and sprites and all of these other things.
Jesus.
But it's also like, so So like every time you press a button, it's kind of like one frame that's running you through the animations. But then when you get to the actual fights and stuff, it's like press A to do this move or B to do this move. And whichever one you actually press will actually perform that move. It's pure wizardry.
Yeah.
And also it seems like the guy is from Minnesota because it's all Minnesota themed too. And you go to Owatonna and you go to the Twin Cities.
Is there an Ooftamon?
It's a very weird.
Ooftamon?
Ooftamon, yes.
Interesting.
So we'll provide the link, but it's a people, man.
Weird.
If you ever wanted to play a font, you can now do it. What a time to be alive.
Heck yeah. Leo, is it a good time to be alive? You tell me.
With my newest get a load of this. Have you heard of this one, Hanson? A Life Well Tasted.
No, Robert Ashley?
Robert Ashley, who did the podcast, A Life Well Wasted, the video game podcast we both love. We all love. It's a YouTube channel he's been doing lately. Very under the radar, 460 subscribers right now. But it's minimally produced cooking videos where he has a head-mounted camera and he just cooks and talks through what he's doing. And it's very soothing listening. He's got a great voice.
Yeah.
And it's nice content to have on while I'm editing or something where I kind of tune in and out of it and am just like picking up some cooking tips, but mostly it's just like relaxing background noise.
I love the idea of him going from the most disastrously overproduced podcast of all time about video games that he just got bogged down with and couldn't keep up with the production. Now it's just like, I'll just strap a GoPro to my head and cook salsa.
And it's great.
That's perfect. I love it.
A Life Well Tasted.
Hey, get a load of this. David Wise, the old Rare composer, Donkey Kong Country is kind of his biggest claim to fame, but so many great soundtracks throughout the years. He, along with other former Rare people, started up something called DK Creations. Not Donkey Kong, mind you, legally. This is just DK Creations. And they have a band called Salamandos, the Salamandos. And so I guess they've been performing some of these songs live and doing like signings. And he released what he describes as the first 8-bit NES-style track he's produced in 30 years. And it's for when he's doing live shows with the Salamandos, he plays this while they're signing things, like signing old games and stuff. But I just want to sit back and listen to some new 8-bit music from this classic Rare composer, David Wise here. It goes on like that. You get the idea, but it's very good new David Wise music. And he also has a track that is very Donkey Kong inspired. So if you like the old Donkey Kong soundtracks, the composer is making new stuff that sounds a lot like it. So check it out. Links below.
Do 8-bit composers have like a preferred program for making those? Or do they just use like modern music making software?
I have no idea, my friend. I have no idea. Jeff, do you have one from the community, from the Discord?
Yeah, get a load of this. This one was posted by The Smack, and it is a Twitter thread by Rami Ismail, former Lambeer co-founder, made Nuclear Throne, all that kind of good stuff. But basically, he watches the trailer for 6 Days in Fallujah and kind of talks through a lot of the problems with it, and he has an entire Twitter thread that he kind of followed up through it. And it is a really edifying and interesting look at a lot of the problems with that game. And it's worth everyone taking a look at.
Well, there we go. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the MinnMax Show podcast. Heads up, we have MinnMax Council, our Patreon exclusive podcast. This week, Kyle called in, talked about his new love affair with Undermine. We also review Justice League and talk about that. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out at MinnMax Council if you support us over on Patreon. Also, this Sunday at 6 p.m. Central, so March 28th at 6 p.m. Central, if you support us at the MinnMax Council tier on Patreon, you can call in and podcast with us. You can be on the show if you've always wanted to talk to us, or you've always wanted just to be on a podcast and have me listen to you talk about your favorite game of all time or what you've been playing. You can jump in there by supporting us at the MinnMax Council tier on Patreon, and then you can be on the podcast this Sunday. So let me know if you have any questions about how that works. We'd love to hear some new voices. It's always fun. Next week should be exciting. One of the things we have going on, is this next week? Yeah, I guess new episode of Better Quest, our show all about getting better with the great Jeff Cork, now out of Game Informer Jeff Cork, a post-Game Informer Jeff Cork. We'll talk about what his life is like these days. And Better Quest is our show all about getting better. So if there's something that's been nagging you for like, I should really do this, but I don't want to, I don't really have the motivation to improve this aspect of myself, that's what Better Quest is all about. So choose a goal for the month of April for yourself, and then you can jump in the Discord or not, but you're welcome to jump in the Discord. There's a whole channel dedicated to talking about how you're doing with this goal, where you're at, and gonna get some nice encouragement from the community. There's a spreadsheet. You can enter your goal. It tracks the overall level of the community. And if your goal is interesting and you're doing well, there's a good chance we'll call you up to be on Better Quest as well to talk about that goal. Also, reminder that we have our own goal on Patreon. If we hit 2,500 supporters on Patreon, we're recording commentary tracks for the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition Trilogy. We're slowly inching towards it, but thanks to everybody for saying thanks for the content by supporting us at any tier on Patreon to get us that much closer to recording those commentary tracks, which should be a hell of a good time. Anybody else have something to plug?
Yeah, I have like my full reviews of both the new Immortals DLC and the Dota anime. I think that'll actually be up tomorrow if you're listening to this live. But I'll have both of those reviews up soon. You can just find those on my Twitter. Or go to Polygon and GameSpot.com for those.
Cool. That sounds good. Well, we should thank all of our supporters at the $50 tier over on Patreon. I sent names over to you on Discord. Do y'all want to run down those names in complete unison?
Oh, at the same time? Okay.
Yep. Okay. People are sick of my voice, so I'll let you three take it. Jeff, you got in there?
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
And this is everybody who supports us at the $50 tier. Thank you so much to everybody that supports us over at Patreon. Specifically, thank you goes out to
Will Cornelius, Mirko Arico-Torreno, MoonFaceNick, Zachary Pligge, BeatenDownBrian, Rated for Gamers, Mark Seliga, Andrew Uerkwitz, Jawarhello, Bryan with the Y, PrettyGoodPrinting.com, Andrew Vala, Ludwig Roque, SuperSeriousSam, Yarrow, SpiralInYourEyes, Richard Nuts, Clint Farley, Clayton Myers, Preetham Yarlagadda, Starkiller, Steve Bamdad, Jesse Kelly, Nick, Alex Payne. I accidentally said Richard Nuts instead of Richard Smuts, but how do you get us to stop and do it again? You know, I just had to power through it, so apologies.
Do you want us to take it from the top, Leo?
Yeah, why don't we take it from the top, but off air?
Okay, yeah, no problem. Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Be good, have fun, let's go.